Hello and welcome, everybody, to our September 1st APCHA meeting. We are going to be in sort of hybrid mode today, so if you're watching online, we're going to be navigating through that. We have a lot of important stuff on our agenda today. We have a very special guest who are going to be meeting, who will not be a guest for long. So we'll start off, Cindy, if you could read the roll.
Carson.
Here.
Skippy.
Present.
Rachel.
Here.
David.
He muted himself.
David?
You are muted.
Here, present.
Francie.
I'm here.
Kelly.
Here.
That's it. So who's out right now is John Ward. And Allison Bektish has been appointed to replace Rick. And her term actually did start tonight. So Rick is here just to address you guys in a little bit.
Okay, and John will not join us, and neither will Allison.
I don't know about John. Allison will not tonight.
Okay. So if John does join digitally or in person, I will make sure to let that know for the record. So today's a public meeting. There is an opportunity for public comment. We don't have any in the room. I do have a few to read into the record that were emailed in for us. But I would ask, is there anybody in the digital space who wants to comment? If so, just unmute yourself, state your first and last name, and then 3 minutes for anything not on the agenda.
So, Mr. Chairman, at some point under public comment, I'd like to.
I'm not sure if I'm doing this correctly. This is Andrea Boer, and I just wanted to make sure that you had received the board had received my letter in support for the modification of the retirement regulations.
I do, Andrea, and in fact, I will read that into the record now, and then if there's anything else that you want to add,
Skippy,
you can just...
they should actually be read as part of the public hearing process when we get to the regulations, because they all
Okay.
revolve around the regulations.
Okay, we did receive your letter, Andrea. Is there anything you'd want to add about anything not pertaining to the regulations?
No, that's it. Thank you so
Okay.
much.
Thank you so much for being here. So just, Cindy, if you could remind me when we get there to circle back, because I have them at the top. Great. So with that, seeing no more public comment on the online space, I would love to turn it over to our most veteran member, Rick Head.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank
I'm
you.
really attended a meeting, so my glasses fog up with this thing. I'm sorry. First, I'd like to congratulate my replacement, Allison Bektish, and of course thank her for her willingness to serve. I wish her all the best and good luck, Allison. I ask for your forgiveness in reading from my notes, but I've never quite mastered the ability to speak extemporaneously like a lot of you other guys and girls. When the suggestion was made to restructure the APCHA Board of Directors under the new IGA, one which would include officials, elected officials, I must admit I had my doubts, and I was a bit unsure of its workability given the fact that it had been tried before and failed. After the change was made, I continued to be unsure of that decision until recently, when I began to see real progress. And it seemed that for so many months we were just spinning our wheels and not getting anything done. I believe now, however, we've righted the ship, and I have complete confidence the current board will continue its progress of amending, clarifying, and creating new regulations, tackling capital reserve enigma, settling the centennial lawsuit, and so many other issues going forward. I won't go into the process involved and how it was done, but here are a few of the highlights, in my opinion, of some of the most important accomplishments in the last 2 years that the board should take pride in. Creating an RFP and vetting 3 great candidates for the position of hearing officer, utilizing new tools at their disposal for dealing with non-compliance issues, is critical to allowing the board to focus full-time on policy deliberations. Constant and persistent tweaking of the APCHA housing regulations, which included fee increases and fine structure policy approvals for the hearing officer to use as a template for addressing infractions, as well as many other improvements, all contributing to the overall goal of improving the process of administering the program. Navigating and resolving an almost 5-year nightmare with Mr. Lee Mulcahy and his mother, with an outcome acceptable to both parties, without the need for continued lengthy litigation. In addition to a 5-year strategic plan ratified by the City Council and County Commissioners, the Board's work continued uninterrupted by the inglorious departure of our last Executive Director, Mike Kostrowski, a year ago. This may be a good time to acknowledge his replacement after that occurred, while we began a search for a full-time permanent Executive Director. Right out of the chute, she hit the ground running and was able to quickly get her arms around very complex issues facing the program, including completing the successful launch of the Home Trek platform and insisting the task of finding her replacement. In the beginning, I found it so helpful that she reached out to each board member individually to more fully understand our concerns and aspirations for the program. I could go on in describing the leadership skills demonstrated and the enormous contribution Assistant City Manager Diane Forster has made. It's been an honor and pleasure. I'd also like to welcome our new Executive Director, Matthew Gillen, as well as congratulate him for one of the best interviews I've ever witnessed, and wish him all the best in his new role as Diane's successor. In no special order, I'd like to also acknowledge a few others I've had the pleasure of working with over the past decade. Tom Smith, our in-house attorney, for his sage counsel and in keeping us all out of jail. All at the expense of his golf game. Cindy Christensen for her tireless work ethic, and our mother hen for almost 30 years. She was the glue that kept this board together and staff through many trying times, has apparently reluctantly given her 10-year notice of retirement.
Which was not accepted.
Bethany Spitz, our compliance manager, overseeing all the compliance issues, and for her tireless effort in helping the board restructure APCHA's regulations line by line. Andrew Miller, business analyst, for his meticulous minute-taking in our meetings, and not to mention his enormous help in implementation of the Home Trek launch. Julie Kiefer, compliance officer. Maddie Feder, for keeping us all connected on Zoom meetings during the COVID shutdown. And so many others for their contributions to the seamless and smooth administration of the APCHA office. And finally, to my fellow board members, new and old, thank you for your service. I have every confidence you will continue to tirelessly attack the daunting tasks before you, and perhaps one day you'll receive some good press, acknowledging the difficult work you do and is so richly deserved. Thank you for your time. And with that, and with all due respect, I am going to watch the rest of this on television.
Thank you for
Kelly.
coming in.
Thanks,
Not
Rick.
until we get to say a word or two.
Kelly, you had a hand up here.
Okay, I'll be brief, but gosh, Rick, I'm gonna miss you. I really miss all of your history and your own sage guidance for the rest of us here at the table.
Thank you,
And,
Kelly. Appreciate it.
You know, I will say, I think APCHA needs more cheerleaders in the community, so cheerleader number one, I hope, here for
I
us.
will
And
be an advocate
I
for
look forward
sure.
to that too, and I'll buy you a drink at
You
the
bet.
Elks one of these
I look
days.
forward to that.
Okay.
Thanks, Kelly. Rachel?
Well, thank you, Skippy. Rick, you and I have known each other for a very, very long time. And I really want to thank you for bringing a very common sense and straightforward approach to the APCHA issues and taking, consideration of the renter, the seller, the buyer, the owner, the public needs and expectations into account as you've made your decision. You've been stalwart and strong, and I appreciate that greatly. I wish you great success in your APCHA retirement.
Thank you, Rachel.
Anybody else?
That's enough. I'm going to cry if you keep this
All
up.
right, well, let's turn on the waterworks.
I look forward to buying you some drinks.
Some
at the
cocktails.
Elks
Me
and,
too, the Elks.
And I guess I'm gonna have to take over as the person to be the first one to jump in and adjourn the meetings.
Well, Rick, thanks so much. And for years.
You
of
bet, Skippy. And I
service.
wish you all the best of luck as well,
Yeah,
managing this crew.
really appreciate it. Yeah, your service has been tremendous, and I know for me, seeing you here for so long has been very guiding. And you talked about others as the glue, but you really left the trail for many of us to follow, myself included, and I'm really grateful for that.
And I'm moving and.
Somebody is not on mute.
Well, that's kind of fun. Fun place to be.
Somebody is not muted. Thank you.
You bet. Thank you, guys, and good luck on that.
Bye, Rick.
Beautiful. With that, I'll do one more ask for any public comment from the digital sphere. Thank you guys for making those.
Don't touch my system. I'm muted here.
All right.
Don't touch me.
And with that, we will move from the not always this entertaining public comments
Very professional meeting.
to staff, executive directors' comments and introductions.
That's a tough act to follow. May I share my screen?
Absolutely.
Do I remember how to do that?
Wow, I do not have my computer, so anything that's not on the screen is.
Maddie, can you hook me up as a?
Are you not?
That's resolute faith that if it was a priority to you,
Oh,
you'd
you
not
can
very
join.
quickly.
Sorry, I rejoined. My computer decided to give me the green screen of death,
All right,
blue
on
screen
you.
of death.
She has the slides.
Thank you. Matthew, would you come on up to the table, first and foremost? Woo!
Welcome.
Matthew Gillen, and I do want Matthew to not only provide his introduction, he's going to share with you, I've asked him to share what he's been up to lately, which is both interesting and important work, and it's been fun to have him out here. I really appreciate it when you hear what he's been up to. You'll know why it's especially, I especially appreciate his willingness to come out right now, and you can tell him that you rented a house.
Yeah.
Matthew.
Yes, I rented a house, so we're ready to go. I'll be driving out here with a U-Haul in October, and then my family's going to join when school gets out in Virginia, and they'll be ready to get going in school. So I'm very excited. My paperwork is in with the State Department, so September 30th will be my last day, ending 24 and a half years with them. Nearly half my life, really. So it's going to be a big change, but we're ready to move out here. I don't know if you remember, but my wife's family is in Denver, and my wife's born and bred in Colorado, and I've lived out here before as well. I was a lift op in a rival establishment, but we love coming to Aspen, and we're looking forward to it. And for the past 2.5 weeks, I've been working closely with my colleagues in Kabul, working on the task force, getting Americans out of Kabul. We've been working 24/7 on various task force, so I've been plugged in directly with our brave soldiers and Marines and Navy personnel, and of course the consular officers on the ground there. I was talking to a couple of my friends, well, 3 of my people who used to work for me who were actually on the ground in Kabul. I was talking to them last night, and it's just amazing the work they were doing, getting so many Americans out. And I've been working hard too, so it's been great to carve out some time. And I told my boss, I was like, yeah, I'm gonna have to take a break because I am going out to Aspen to meet my new gang. And so I came here yesterday, had some great meetings today with the APCHA folks, and I'm heading back tomorrow, and probably they'll plug me right back into Afghanistan stuff.
Cool. Matthew, thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank
Thrilled
you.
to have you here and to
it's,
meet you.
Thanks.
Can I just?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm sorry I didn't get a chance to participate in your interview. I had a long family vacation that had been planned, and so I missed it. But I'm thrilled with the result, and I look forward to getting to know you
Great.
better, and you getting to know me, and welcome.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Really looking forward to it.
We actually all had we hold a bi-weekly, Bethany hosts a bi-weekly compliance meeting, Cindy, Bethany, Tom, and myself. And Matthew kind of jumped right into the middle of it, and it was awesome, and it was clear that we had made absolutely the right choice. That he is engaged and actually thinks it's interesting. So.
Yeah. Anything else anyone wants to add or ask or say?
I had a chance to speak with Matthew before the meeting started. I was kind of hibernating in here early.
Thawing your bones.
Awesome.
Well, I'll just say it's really an honor to have you on the team. I got to watch your interview, and I found it to be incredibly impressive. The breadth of your experience that came through, how you worked with competing interests to build consensus but find resolute action despite perhaps imperfect alignment, and the way you were able to boil down those experiences to practical in-office, day-to-day operations, I thought was awesome. And if you can safely extricate people from Kabul, I have absolute faith that you can move people into and around our affordable housing system in Aspen. So thank you.
I don't know. I think we have 35 move-ins to Merill today, which I think is a new record. So, sorry, a little shell shock over there. So with that, next,
Rachel raised is
oops,
raising.
sorry, Rachel.
Thank
Good
you.
catch.
Yeah, no, I was just going to welcome you as well. I was also equally impressed with your interview, and you were the only choice for me. So we're really excited, and I wish you were already on board as we're still sorting through some of this policy stuff now. Thank you.
Thanks, Rachel.
Awesome. Diane, you got anything else
Great.
for us in here?
A couple other things. One is we will be bringing you the budget. Cindy, Bethany, and I, what's today? Today's Wednesday. So Friday we'll be going to the agency directors team, which is Sarah's leadership team. We'll be doing a presentation then. And we'll be taking both the budget and the work plan. And then we'll be seeking, coming to the board on the 15th and hoping for final sign off by the board by the 1st of October. And then we'll be taking it to the City Council and the BOCC. We're going to talk about work plan tonight. Home track and revision. The team is continuing to take a deep dive on this and looking at if we are going to move the front end of home track into WordPress, which is a much more flexible environment. They're taking a deep dive into some of the security elements right now. And we've got support from the city's strategy and innovation team, which includes a lot of really strong, long kind of people who've been in technology for a long time. And we've also, Cindy's been taking the lead with finance on looking at if we want to make this change. It looks to be about a $300,000 project. We actually got to the point where we believe we're pretty certain we have the funding in the current home track budget to be able to fund this, so we wouldn't need to ask for a new allocation. The timing on this, though, is that it's probably a 6 to 8 month project, so we would still have to pay the $82,000 in licensing costs for next year. Remember, we pay $126,000 in Salesforce licenses. $80,000 of that is for the community portal piece. We'd still have the other $40,000 roughly. But we'd be able to get rid of that number in 2023, which is about a 5-year payback, a little short of a 5-year payback. So still looking at that, and we'll continue to give you updates on that. Rachel's been reminding us about the importance of communicating in Spanish. So these folks at the table. these folks right here at the table, Nicole and Maddie, are working on translating our buyer's and renter's guide into Spanish. And also, what did we decide yesterday that we were going to do something else in Spanish?
The application side.
Right.
Affidavit.
Oh, and
The
the affidavit in the future. Yep. Bethany, you want to take this one?
Sure. So we've been sending out affidavits since early June. We have an 86% completion rate right now. We're still missing 212 of those. We have tried email and mail, and our next attempt, I think, is going to be to walk some of the properties and stick some notices up on doors. So we're hopeful that we're going to get the rest of them done. And the data that's coming through is really interesting. A lot of what was talked about before is the census. We included a couple extra questions in this affidavit to try to figure out how many folks are in the unit, whether it be dependents or renters or owners. And so I think there's going to be some great data for both the board and the public figuring out how many people are actually housed.
Awesome.
So all of the talk of census, yes, we haven't done the census, but the affidavit's going to include that data for us. So.
That's awesome. Questions or thoughts for staff on any of those things?
I may have one more. Nope, that's it. Great.
Seeing none. I just want to offer a thank you to Rachel for continuing to push that translation piece. I think it's such an important part, as we've all discussed as a board, to include the entirety of our community. And so thank you for taking that time and extra effort. It's really meaningful. Okay, is that it? All right, then we will close our executive director and staff comment section, move to our consent calendar, which is the minutes from our August 18th, 2021 regular meeting, and I would accept a motion to approve or anything for a change. Don't all jump at once.
I'll make a motion to approve it. I'll let you know you have to come.
I don't know if I have to move. I'll let you, because I wasn't here. So it makes sense for you to.
But I don't think she
But she
can
can
because
doesn't
while
have to
you're
know.
Because
here.
you're here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I wasn't there, so for me to move the minutes
I will
doesn't make
make
sense.
a motion to approve the minutes of July 20th.
August.
August
or
18th.
yeah, August 18th.
Whatever month.
Whenever it was.
Second.
All right, with a motion from Carson and a second from Rachel, can you please read the roll to approve the minutes of
Yes.
18th?
Carson,
Yes.
David? David?
Yes.
Rachel?
Yes.
And Kelly?
I'm going to abstain. Can I do that?
Yep.
Since I wasn't there? Okay, thank you.
So that is a 3-0?
Yeah, we're fine. Yep.
Okay. And it still passes with 3?
Yes.
As the majority?
Yeah.
Great. Okay. With that, we will move into the meat of our agenda. We have a lot going on today. And so we will try to move through this expeditiously, but without missing anything of importance, because these are big changes. The first thing is the second reading. So this has been discussed multiple times at our meetings by the board, of a variety of employee housing regulation changes. We're going to take these in discussion one at a time for the board to review final presentation from staff. And then at the end, we will hopefully adopt these all as a package or with amendments for anybody following along online. So we're going to start at the top, and I'll ask staff to walk us through the changes to modification of retirement and disability work hearing, and then we'll go through that bit and then on to the next.
Great. So Skippy, we took your request and have made slides. So what you will see, we'll walk through slide by slide what the change is so that folks at home can follow along with us. So 2 pieces for retirement age. Again, we have talked about amending from 4 years of work history prior to point of retirement to 10 years. And then a piece that I don't think was thoroughly discussed at last meeting was the addition of a provision that allows an individual to be allowed to retire at age 62 if they can document a 30-year work history with 15 of those years immediately preceding retirement age residing in APCHA housing. So that means 15 years before age 62, they're in APCHA housing, but there's a 30-year documented work history.
Rachel, is that a visual hand? Yes.
Yeah, Bethany and others, I received an email just last night, and I had just gotten back from vacation by a member of the Pitkin County Senior Council who is looking at their multiple areas of living, the pillars of a good life, and one of them is housing and staying at home, how to keep housing. And one of the issues that was raised in that email, which I forwarded to Skippy and Diane, and I can't remember if I included you, Cindy, or not, I may have, was what about if there's been work disruptions in this past COVID year in particularly, and this requirement that it be continuous work, and yet for many people, especially seniors, before the vaccine, the ability to keep working was pretty limited. And you saw nationally an awful lot of people actually choosing early retirement because of that. Whether they could afford to financially or not, they had to get some money coming into their lives. So that is just one of the concerns, but I wanted to ask Diane and yourself, Skippy, how do we begin to incorporate those concerns since we've really finally heard from a special interest group after all the outreach we were trying to do during COVID.
Thanks, Rachel.
So just to follow up on that, Rachel, we waived the work requirement for all individuals in 2020. So that would be an allowable year off of work. So we have not waived it for 2021. So folks do have to go back in, but we did waive it for 2020. But I think the document in itself should still read this way. Tom can weigh in on something as well if he sees a change. Cindy, I don't know if.
Yeah. I just think we have to be careful about what 2021 was and is. We had to shut the town down in January for 2 weeks. We didn't have vaccines widely available until closer to March. And even now with breakthrough cases, I know a lot of people who are very, very paranoid because we're protecting school children, but not essential workers anymore.
And Rachel, I think that's a great point, and we are open to, if the town shuts down, if something happens, we certainly can make a change. The majority of what we've seen is folks going back to work, and the few that haven't gone back to work that we have spoken to, and again, this isn't everyone, but they have chosen not to go back to work because unemployment pays more. And so I think it's this fine line of it is employee housing, and so if their reasoning is a health reason, I think that's a different situation than just choosing to not work. But I think we can make a change. We can make a change.
The real challenge is right now our governor and local governments have basically told people it's up to you to protect yourself however you see fit. And if that's masking all the time, or if that's not being able to go into a workplace that requires you to show up. So as long as we are going to take it individually and take a look at what people's real reasons were, again, this is really just directed towards the senior population who might be trying to take advantage of this. But I do think that they have other concerns with how APCHA is going to be looking at other treatment of seniors' issues, and I want to find a way to start to really incorporate them in our discussions.
And that's great, and we've been, Cindy and I have opened up, this is on a side note, communications with the county, and we've been working with them to get some of their seniors into our Aspen Country and senior priority. So we've been having a lot of conversations outside of this room and certainly trying to assist that subset of the population.
Rachel, just
Thank you.
because you specifically mentioned Diane and I in the question, first, thank you for bringing it up and thank you for forwarding it. I'm comfortable with this change, as is, knowing that we've made accommodation based on COVID in the past and will as needed going forward. But I think your point, which I'm kind of proposing for the board, is one of the things on our 2022 work plan is the right sizing question. I think that the senior community should be very central to that work and included in it from the beginning to make sure that it's genuinely providing a benefit and an opportunity for that community within our housing system. So to me, that would be a very natural place to plug them in. In addition, and not at this table, but I think in our discussions around housing development at City Council, it's really important to have those voices there. So that's kind of my thought process, and I kind of look to the board to say, is right sizing the right place to plug in the senior community now that they're a bit more activated?
Just to weigh in first, if I could, Skip. Well, and literally when we get to our conversations tonight about the reduction in appreciation based on units and how low that should be, or how much public money should go into units, because the question of someone moving and selling an APCHA unit and right sizing is going to be very related to, can they afford to move, and what will they take out of their current unit to put into where they're moving to. So, I mean, all these issues really relate,
Right.
and especially when we start talking about people who've lived in their units for 30, 40 plus years.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Guys, is the GrassRoots audience still able to see?
Yeah, so
They can.
they can hear things.
They can hear things.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just
So just so you guys know, David, Rachel, Tom, we had a computer restart in here, so the public audience can see you. We cannot. So I can't see your raised hands. So if you want to jump into the conversation, please let me know verbally, and it should be back up and running in just a few seconds. So.
Okay. Thank you.
Can people at home see the slides? I don't see how they would be able to.
I literally don't know.
Grassroots,
Oh,
you
we
have
can?
no visual
We see
feed.
the room, but we can't see anything.
Okay, let's take a quick pause then, guys, if you can just hold tight until we get the feedback up for the public. That would be awesome. And I'm including the senior community in ongoing discussions.
Skippy, can you hear me? This is Tom. Can you hear me?
I can, Tom, but just pause for 1 second so that we're getting this right back up.
I'm just trying
yes.
to test my audio.
I can hear you. We can all hear you in here.
I can still text you.
All right.
Well done. Great.
All right, we are back up and running. That was some very quick work. Thanks, guys. All right, guys, I'll bring the discussion back to the line. That's okay.
Are we disconnected on that?
Yeah. Do you mind putting in that number?
What's that? Go for it. I don't know which one. There's a million of them.
Yeah, pretty much.
The top one. *23830.
First step as you cross buttermilk. Yeah.
Okay, so thank you for bearing with us. We were just talking about the inclusion of the senior community in ongoing discussion, so I turn that question back to you, Diane. Presumably what comes from this meeting is going to involve additional staff time and detail on all levels, including the financial Rachel mentioned. Will that be an opportunity for us to check in with the senior community as part of that?
Yes, and I would say that they're not mutually exclusive. We don't have to say the seniors are going to be part of this meeting, right? I think what Rachel has provided, and sorry, I didn't actually see it till this afternoon. It came in at 11:15 last night, and I was asleep. But I think the work that Cindy and Bethany are doing with the county, the work that Nan Sundin and her team are doing, and kind of bringing that all to the table at the same time makes sense.
Okay,
Thanks.
great. So any remaining questions around the retirement age piece from anybody?
When you say it's a time for the seniors to be involved, who are you talking about? Will there be a representative from the senior council, or what would that look like?
Rachel, can you? You're on mute.
You're on mute,
Still on mute.
Rachel. She can't hear us.
She can't now.
Sorry, Francine, if I wasn't as clear before. I received an email last night from a member of the senior council who had been designated to begin tracking and being involved with housing issues on behalf of the senior council.
So that's what you mean, that specific, the senior council is what
Yeah.
you mean, okay.
And of course, any other senior in the community is always welcome here.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Okay. So is there anyone not comfortable moving this forward as it is then?
The thing of it is that we can't move the slide.
Skippy, I'm very comfortable moving it forward, but the one thing is just we've put in 62 now, and I know that they changed Social Security rules for people like myself who were born in 1960 and older, and our age is 63. And so I think that if Social Security early retirement age is adjusted again upwards or something like that, we need to make it clear we're sticking with that same standard.
Staff, can you?
62 is really good for just people who are under 1959 and before.
Understood. Can you respond to that? Because we had talked about the Social Security standard as the standard.
So there's two pieces to it. The reason we put in 1 year is to make it as simple as possible. That doesn't mean that we can't adjust it down the road and up it to 63 or make some amendment as retirement age changes. We haven't had a change in retirement age, full Social Security benefits in quite a number of years. That doesn't mean it's not coming down the pipeline from the IRS.
Yeah.
In a previous meeting,
Yeah.
we had talked about.
And I'm not going to hold it up on that. I just wanted to point out that not everyone has the same early social retirement years.
Right.
Great.
But if it's easier to leave it at 62, that's fine.
Okay. Great.
Yeah, and we do have it in our definition that if at any time the federal government changes that, it's not an automatic change on our end. We would bring it back to the board to discuss that if the federal government made changes as to years. Like instead of retiring at the age of 65, you have to now wait till you're 70. If something like that happens, we wouldn't do an automatic change in the regulations. We would bring it back to the board first.
Beautiful. Okay. Let's move forward to the next item on our list, and this is.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Maddie, is it possible to close that?
No, it's not responding.
That's what's not responding.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
So it's
Either
either.
we
Oh.
would do it, or,
No, you're good.
We're good.
or I wait.
So I.
Waiting's great.
Except for anyone at home is seeing this too.
But they
They
can
can
see.
still see it move.
Okay.
They'll just be muted.
Okay.
And then I'll put up this recording on the website. That's fine. I know, it's not ideal, but.
Great. Okay, so I'm okay to keep going?
Yeah, can you just explain what they're seeing at home? They're seeing the same,
They're
right?
seeing this.
Okay.
It's just muted.
Okay.
Like this. It's just not bright.
Right. Muted in color,
Color.
not in
Muted in
volume.
color, yes.
Okay, thank you. That's important.
Too many versions of the mute word. So.
All right, so moving on to our second item here, limiting applicants to bid up one category.
So bid submission. So the proposed change is bids will only be accepted for the category the applicant is in and one category higher. The example on the screen is a category 2 bidder will only be allowed to bid on category 2 and category 3 properties. They will no longer allowed to be able to bid on Category 4 properties.
Great. Questions on this? Seeing none. Is there anyone who is not able to support this or has a change they'd like to offer? Love that. All right, moving on to our next topic, which is transfer and conveyances outside the bid process.
Okay, so this section has been to quite a few number of meetings, so I've tried to provide some highlights in this slide. It requires that the child the unit is being conveyed to meets the requirements of the deed restriction and the APCHA regulations for a qualified buyer, subject to the following modifications. Assets and income must be at or below Category 5. Occupancy requirement -1 must be met. This can be waived with a 10-year work history in Pitkin County. So that's for a child. Requires that the sibling the unit is being conveyed to meets the requirements of the deed restriction and the APCHA regulations for a qualified buyer. So the sibling needs to meet, the sibling has no modifications, where a conveyance to a child there are 2 modifications. And then all transfers require a new deed restriction be placed on the unit, and a $1,000 transfer fee.
Yes. Okay. Questions on this? Okay. Anyone who is unable to support this or has changes that they would like to suggest? Okay, great. Then we will move on to regulations dealing with the death of a qualified employee.
So at all of your requests, we have aligned this provision with the conveyances outside the bid process. It's provided more clarity as well. The prior provision did not provide protections for an owner who died unexpectedly and was not able to transfer their unit to a child. So we have provided consistent paths, and it also provides more protection for a tenant and allows another tenant to remain in the unit, assuming qualification, when previously the tenant had to leave at the end of the lease term.
Okay, any questions on this one? No. Any reason anyone can't support this or would offer alterations? All right, guys, this is quick. Okay, then we'll move on to our next, which is a request for leave.
It's like David raised his hand.
Oh, David, I'm sorry. The visual muting. Please jump in. David, can you hear us? I think he's frozen.
Yeah, he's muted.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
There you are.
Yes.
All right, great, thank you. An owner dies unexpectedly, provides more protection. Would you please explain that to me one more time? It was kind of quick. Whoever just explained that, I can't see anyone, of course.
Sure. So let me just pull up the actual page in front of me. I don't have it, so that I can give it to you correctly. As Cindy's finding that. So essentially what happened is there was no provision to transfer a unit to a child if an owner died unexpectedly. So that could have possibly been in the works, or the owner's intention that they would like to transfer it to their child, but that had never been done. And so what we have done is we have aligned it with the conveyances outside the bid process. So we have said that if a child would like to take over that unit and their parent has died unexpectedly, they have to be qualified, and they have to meet the same requirements, with the 2 modifications that their income has to be at or below a Category 5, and they have to meet occupancy -1. So we're providing those same protections, whereas before there was no protections, the unit would have automatically gone back into APCHA's lottery pool.
Got it. Okay, so basically, exactly, this is simply for an unexpected death.
Correct.
Got it. All right, thank you very much.
Of course.
David, makes sense to you? Good to go on this one?
Yes.
Okay, beautiful. All right, then let's move to requests for leave.
So Skippy, actually, E ties directly into F, so I'm going to cover them in one slide.
Perfect.
So the leave request actually has to do with the special review process. So I'm going to talk about removal of special review first. So we will remove the special review section from the APCHA regulations because there could be inconsistencies and some waivers may seem unfair and inconsistent. So APCHA staff will assess any requests to see if recommendations should be addressed in the regulations in the future, and certainly take them to the board to review and approve or deny if it gets to that point. APCHA staff has also promised to keep track of those requests to see if there are one-off requests or something that should really be addressed. And then where the leave request comes in, if a leave of absence is denied by APCHA staff, the hearing officer will hear the appeal. Normally it went through the special review, but now the hearing officer will hear if a leave of absence is denied.
Questions? Seeing none, I have just one. Other than the leave request, are there any other types of requests that would have gone to special review that now land on the hearing officer?
No.
Okay. That is my question. Okay. So this is a public hearing. So I'd like to open up the opportunity for public comment on any of the things that we have heard. We do not have anyone in the room, so if you're in the digital space, I can't see you. I do have these 2 letters that I will read into the record. But outside of those, if there's anyone else on who'd like to speak, just please unmute yourself, state your name, and you have time to share your thoughts with us. And we'll give this a minute for the digital lag. All right. Hearing none from the digital space, I do have 2 public comments that were submitted to us via email that I'd like to read for the consideration of the board as well as for the public and press in the room and otherwise. So this says, quote, Cindy and board members, I write to support the proposed language edits under consideration concerning retirement qualifications, which will allow individuals to continue to rent, own, deed-restricted housing in Aspen and Pitkin County when retired. While workforce housing is a critical element in our resort community, retirement is a natural progression. The standards proposed support the need for housing during working years and yet allow people to truly be part of their community without being forced to relocate once retirement age is upon them. 62 is the minimum age to receive benefits under federal Social Security standards, and thus a reasonable standard. Those who contributed in the workforce, who have planned well and are able to retire at that age, should not be forced out of their community. Thanks to APCHA for all you do to keep our community great! Exclamation mark, David Harris. And that is one. Second, and this is from Andrea. Do we pronounce it Boer? Boer. Okay. Dear APCHA Board.
Then there's one more.
Oh, and there's one
Sorry.
more.
Skippy.
Dear APCHA Board, I'm writing to voice my support for the modification of retirement regulations. I am 40-year local and have long followed and supported APCHA's mission to provide long-term affordable workforce housing to strengthen the community and economy. I have worked for the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, as an emergency responder for more than 30 years. Through my frequent assignment prevented me from qualifying for affordable housing, I have many friends who are vital components of our community and are approaching retirement age. Within the federal system, one is able to retire at 55 if they have 30 years of service, or 60 after serving 20 years. The proposed amendment of age 62 with 30 years in the community and 15 contiguous years in employee housing is appropriate, just as within the interest of maintaining a healthy, age-diverse community as well as within the guidelines of APCHA's mission. Respectfully, Andrea. Thank you very much for that, Andrea. Andrea, I know you were on the line earlier. Is there anything that you wanted to add to that while we're on your letter? Okay. Hearing none, I have one more to read into the record, and this is so nice that people have submitted stuff ahead of time. Thank you to everybody. And if you're watching and you haven't, you can in the future. Aspen Pitkin County Housing Authority Board of Directors. Aspen has been my home for over 30 years, and I was fortunate enough to have lived for several years in one of the Williams Woods affordable housing units in the 1990s. It was a turning point for me, as a free market housing options for the workforce were prohibitively expensive and limited. And I probably would not have stayed and made Aspen my home if it wasn't for the availability of affordable housing through APCHA. I appreciate APCHA's efforts to strengthen and revise regulations that reflect the realities in all age groups who live in our unique community. With that in mind, I am writing this letter to support the proposed amendment to APCHA's regulations, which will permit individuals currently renting or owning deed-restricted housing to remain in their unit at a retirement age of 62, along with meeting the requirements of having lived 30 years in our community and 15 contiguous years in employee housing. This amendment is fair, realistic, and respects the fact that those of retirement age should not be forced to relocate or potentially leave their community because of their desire to retire at age 62. The decision to retire is a personal one, and there are many reasons and circumstances taken into consideration in the decision-making process. As a community, we should embrace those who have worked hard and contributed to our community in immeasurable ways, and once they are upon retirement age, they should not have to worry or stress about losing their home. I believe all of us want a diverse and viable community, and revising the APCHA regulation to reflect a retirement age of 62 should be supported by the board. Thank you for your consideration, Diane Moore. Thank you for that. Pass that back. Anybody else jump in who wants to add anything to the discussion from the public? Okay, then I will close the public section comment of this. I will turn it back to the board. I know that we have support for this, so I would simply ask, before a motion is made, is there anything that any board members wanted to share or comment on? Seeing none. Great. I'll just make one. What's that?
Rachel has her.
Oh, Rachel, is your hand up?
I just wanted to take the time to thank Cindy and Bethany and Diane, as well as our board, for talking through some tough issues, and look forward to sorting through the next of them. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. I appreciate that. I'll just very quickly, Kelly.
You can go.
No.
Okay. Yeah, these are really tough issues, and for me, you know, it kind of has pulled in some clarity about just the difficulty in weighing, I think, what multiple values are. And, you know, we do that a lot with a lot of these decisions, but it's easy to get pulled aside by someone on the street who's like, this is workforce housing, you know, retirees need another plan. And, you know, or to get pulled aside by somebody else who, you know, has a very personal and sympathetic story. And, you know, and we're trying to strike that balance between efficiency in a system and also like compassion with real people's lives. And I know it's not always easy. And sometimes I wonder if we're getting it right. I think some of these, you know, updates, I'm like, absolutely, we're getting it right, you know, and some of these I'm like, gosh, we may hear a sympathetic story in the future that causes us to look at this from a different lens, and I'm okay with that. I feel good about it. You know, I feel good about this direction, and also about our need to stay open and receptive to unintended consequences maybe we don't see yet. So I appreciate the work of this board to kind of wrestle through that, and I know that these same tensions are just going to persist through more of the issues we have in front of us.
Thanks, Kelly.
Well said.
Really well said. Okay. Yeah, I'll second that, Kelly. I view the uniform support on this board through this complicated process as a reflection of really good collective sense-making and the ability to hold things in concerts that could be conflictual, but in this case support one another. We are a community, and a community is nothing if not the transfer of knowledge, bless you, through the generations. And what this collection of things does, it further cements our community through our most precious resource of housing, while also building more accountability and more optimized use of the system so we can get the most out of this scarce resource. And I just think that's a really beautiful balance, so thank you all. And with that, I would accept a motion to approve.
So moved.
Would you like to
Second.
All right. We've got a motion for approval by Kelly and a second by Carson. Cindy, would you read the roll, please?
Yes. Kelly,
Yes.
Rachel,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
Carson.
Yes.
Thank you.
Beautiful. All right. Does anyone need like a quick little stretch or bathroom break before we move on?
Yes.
Yes?
So then I can restart this.
Okay. We're going to take a 2-minute stretch break, restart our computer so everyone's not frozen, and then come right back in the room. Thank you.
Do we need to leave the meeting and rejoin it?
I'm getting
You shouldn't have to.
No, you're right there. It's just our computer screen is frozen, Rachel, and so
Okay.
we haven't been able to see you. Welcome back. We are technically running again, which is nice. So we're going to turn our attention now to the draft of our 2022 work plan. For the public who has not been following, we adopted our first work plan in 2021. This is not a comprehensive list of everything that happens in the APCHA office. In fact, 95% of the everyday work is not contained in the work plan. This is the big new goal area stuff that hasn't been done before, that is our intention to do for this year. It's intentionally brief in its design, and so we'll be reviewing that so that we can send it back for any final edits and then adopt it as a board at a following meeting. So with that, I will turn it over to staff to present what we have.
Great. May I share my screen? Executive Director. Yep, it's working. Thanks. I won't repeat what Skippy just said, so you see under intent what's new and different.
We don't see it.
No, really?
Zoom is not, it's not having it tonight.
Do you want to bring it up?
It's not gonna pull up on the screen.
Is it not going to pull up if you pull it up?
Mm-mm.
Nope.
No,
Okay.
anything I touch on Zoom right now, it's just gonna freeze again. So-
Okay. It's okay. This doesn't have to be, so I would ask that you reference your packet.
We will
Anyone have a-
reference our packet, but would it be possible, I don't know if Carolyn cares to see it or not, or the public, but can we like email it out
Oh, I got it.
afterwards, just in
Thank
case
you.
you want to reference it?
It's also on our website. The whole packet
Okay,
is on our website.
as long as you got it. Cool.
And anyone have a page number?
80.
80.
It's 80,
Thank you.
yes. 80 is
Okay.
the memo.
Thank you.
Great. So the intent is to make it a single page where possible, and it is an administrative tool. So its primary purpose is as the strategic plan is here's where we're going, here's what the vision is, and this is the nuts and bolts of what's new. At the last meeting, we talked about, there was some good feedback on making sure to communicate the breadth and depth of what APCHA does. And so we are going to be working on what I call APCHA by the numbers. And that will include both detailed information about the inventory, as Bethany said, the data coming back from the affidavit, in addition to what we're able to now report on out of the home track database. And I forgot to mention that Andrew Miller, we were planning on having Andrew on the agenda for September 15th to also come and do a kind of a report overview and start to report on some of the data that's available, as well as the other set of numbers about the volume and diversity of work. How many qualifications do we do? That type of data. The third piece I wanted to highlight, and this is all in your packet as well, that for the APCHA regulations, instead of listing every regulation we're going to touch, the idea here is, hey, we're going to be updating the regulations, and we have a list on the long-range agenda. And secondly, particularly since tonight you approved the removal of the special exception, we've heard loud and clear from the board that when something comes up that is new or different, we want to make sure we have the space, and that we bring those to you promptly as a board, that of recommended changes based on something we've heard. So unanticipated topics. And then also in your packet is just a piece on home track marketing. I was thinking about this a lot afterwards, and we will continue to always make sure we're talking about home track, making sure, updates happen to home track every week. They're typically not things that the consumer sees, but things that we see on our side of the system. And we'll continue to push out tools. But I just want to make sure that the board understands that we're not going to get more people to go to home track for fun, right? People go to it when they need it, and that was the number one learning when we rolled out. We were very worried that we were going to get buried the first couple days, like a Ticketmaster when you go, something goes on sale, and what we found was people logged into the system when they needed to, and like for example, I was talking to Maddie today, and where we've got a lot of focus right now on the turnover of Marolt, right? 100 units there, seasonal.
and they're being filled up. They're completely booked now. And so Maddie said tons of calls today on Home Track because people are going in, doing their leases, doing, signing up, etc. So I wanted to give you that heads up. Two options for how to tackle this next section, given that we, maybe the best way is to have you take, instead of having me go line by line through this as we did last week, is just ask if there are any questions or concerns on this updated version.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, what I was thinking is let's just look at the 22, not the 21 for now. And we'll take this in a few pieces. So the first one is there anything that we think should be cut, that we think doesn't belong here, or perhaps is too ambitious for this year? We want to do it, but maybe this is not the year. So I want to start with that question. Cool. The second question I have is there anything missing? Are there things here that we absolutely want to prioritize and do this year that are not present in this document? Kelly.
I'll just share something that's kind of been gnawing at me for the last couple months, I think, and it's just the work on an affordability standard. It seems so fundamental to the program, and to, really helping people in our community, to pay for what, pay what they should, or pay what they can, and not be paying more. And I've gotten a lot of feedback just about like rental rates in particular, how rental rates have been set for APCHAs, qualified units in particular. So I just want to throw that out there because I don't see it in like the 2-year horizon, and I'm trying to figure out like where it fits in because it does seem so fundamental to me.
Kelly, can you just like double click affordability standard? What specifically do you mean or not mean by that? Is it just rental rates and pricing, or is it more than that?
No, I mean, it's looking at like what are the incomes of people who need affordable housing in our community and are trying to access the APCHA inventory to do that, and have the prices that we've set matching that in a I guess justifiable, defensible way.
And if I can interject, I think it also has to do with should somebody be paying 30% of their income to housing. Right. That's kind of where the affordability standard comes in, is what kind of percentage should somebody be paying from their income to into housing. Yeah. And I know at one point in time we did bring that back to the county commissioners, and actually a couple of years ago the county commissioners did look at this, and I think it was in 2019, and I think we brought forward 30%, and I think you guys were fine with it. We were told not to bring it back in front of the city council, so it never got adopted. I know that Bethany and I talked about that this morning, and it is something that we feel is a policy that we do need to bring back. It's not on the did we add it? We haven't added.
It's on the long-term agenda,
Yes,
but it hasn't been slated into a date, but it is on the long-term agenda.
Yeah. And to be fair, I mean, that could mean increases in categories, like that. I mean, I've had people say to me, like, I don't know why I'm paying this little for this unit,
And that's one of the
based
things
on our family income, so it is like,
because we see that possibly rental rates could be, the monthly rental rates could be affected, the sales prices could be affected as well, once we've come up with a solid affordability standard.
But that also could mean, there's more subsidy to build more units somewhere, right? Like just looking at it from the big picture of affordable housing. So.
Would it be okay to keep that on the long-term agenda, because it is it's 1 or 2 meetings, it's not of the scale of a major project?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's fine. Just for me, it's been like 9, and I don't remember if it showed up on when we prioritized, when we had the list of 8 that we prioritized or not, or so. If I'm the only one who's concerned about it, then that's okay too. But-
I think Diane's point's a good one. I think that's a pretty quick discussion. I think you could just put together some tables of what the various impacts would be. I mean, I think the last time we looked at it, it was the higher categories, the rental rates went up, and then it was the category 1s and 2s where you started to see some decreases in rates.
Decrease in the rental
In
rate?
rental rates, yeah. If you applied like a percentage of income, whatever, that ends up being 20, 30%, whatever.
Thank you.
So would that mean that we would have a flexible rental rate, or we would just adjust them all to fit the certain category 1 or category 2? I mean, would it, if we decide on this affordability rate, let's say we, on a certain percent, would that be, that means that rents would be flexible?
Well,
wouldn't it?
and that, I don't think that's where we wanna go.
Yeah.
That would be too hard for us to really maintain and watch. Because I can almost picture somebody saying, I'm gonna barely work then, because then I can only have to, then I have to pay that. That isn't the intent of the program either. I think what it is, though, is that if you really are a true category 1 person, the maximum rent we should be charging is this. So it's
Okay.
no matter what, it would be that rent for that category unit. If somebody opts to be in a category 2 unit, they opt to be in a category
That's
2
right.
unit, but the category 2 rent is gonna be charged even if they're a category 1.
But then the category 1 people probably have a span of incomes. Like the maximum is, what is the maximum now? Do you know it offhand? It's okay, you don't have to look it up, but whatever it is. So then you get a person who's applying for that, who only makes 2/3 of that, they still are responsible for that category very well.
Yeah, and I think what it is, we end up doing, and I do know that a long time ago, when the city did brand new sales projects, they did not, when we sold them through our lottery system, they did the average between the category, if it was a category 3 unit, they did the maximum sales price between a category 2 and category 3. So when we have to take that into consideration, that somebody could make anywhere between here to here. So maybe we say that the top person can pay this, so let's make the rent a little bit lower. So I think that when we start to work on this, I think that that's something that we can adjust, saying we're not gonna charge the max of what the maximum person can make. Let's kind of do an average in between there, to kind of cover the whole realm of the person who's making at the bottom of that income bracket to the top of that income bracket.
Yeah.
Thank you, Cindy.
Kelly, I'll just say, you're definitely not the only one. I'm super interested in this as well. It is on the long-term agenda to look at affordability standard for category 1 and 2 ownership units. And for me, the interest is in rental and in ownership. But I think a clearer understanding of sort of basic cost of life concerns per person. What does it cost for milk and to fuel up your car and whatever, so that we can make adjustments. I'm not convinced the flat tax, so to speak, is the right solution here, right? Perhaps someone in a higher category should have to pay a higher percentage of their income, because if the lower category person has to meet the same percentage, they simply can't get by. And I think it's of value to us to have everyone whose work is required for the functioning of our community to have an opportunity to live in. So I'm totally with you on that. Diane's suggestion is to Rachel.
Yeah, thank you. Am I unmuted?
Nope.
I was going to wait to discuss on another item, but I think this is very directly tied into my ongoing request that we actually look at area median income again. Because area median income should be measured by the larger geographic area from which your workforce comes. And right now, we only measure the area median income of residents of Pitkin County when we set our categories. And our area median income averages in all the retirees and all the unearned income that people bring with them in trust funds and investments. And until we just start using the Bureau of Labor Statistics and deal with the actual earned income by the workforce that's in category 1, 2, 3, and 4 homes, we are not setting our prices anywhere near the ratio of low-end service workers and what they're actually making. And we're fooling ourselves with the categories we've set up with AMI. I've asked City Council that we start to do this work. I think some of it may be going on for how we look at pricing out Burlingame 3, but I'm not sure. But there's no way to do an affordability income standard and use AMI of all the wealth in Pitkin County, which is now considered to be one of the highest income inequality counties in the country, and pretend that those categories match wages that people are earning. And so I just have to say that there's no reason having a 1 or 2 meeting discussion about a affordability standard if we don't really have a good sense of what each segment of our workforce is really earning.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rachel. Kelly?
No,
And
thanks,
I have
Rachel.
another question comment on when we're on another issue.
Sure. No, I totally appreciate that. And just for a little illustration, I mean, the BOCC had a discussion related to our employee housing impact fee that took 4 meetings, you know? So it's, I do think we should just plan a bigger, like plan more time for it.
So the question
Yeah,
that question I have for the board then is it sounds like there's universal expectation and desire to address this. Does this need to rise to the level of being called out in the work plan for people, or are we comfortable with it in the long-term agenda? Look for any thoughts.
Well, I think that would depend on how long you guys think it would take to amass that information. I mean,
Well, I think, I think it works, the reason I think it works as in the long-term agenda is functionally it's part of the regulations. And the way I think we would at least initially approach it is to do an initial work session to figure out, to hear from the board, as we have tonight, those pieces of what do you want us to look at? So area median income, earned income, if there's any market basket analysis we can bring to the table, but figure out what is it you want to look at, and then depending on the timing of when we do it, and we may have a new staff member on at that point whose job it's going to be to do research and analysis, and then be able to bring back the data. But I do think we're going to need it, at least initially, and I'd recommend that we look at an October timeframe for that initial discussion to say, let's talk about what it is you want to look at, because I think it is going to take staff some time to go out and bring together the data to bring to the board.
Okay. Does that feel
Yeah, that
appropriate?
sounds great.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
The one thing I would just ask is in the long-term agenda, if we can, I think it's currently like specifically for category 1 and 2 ownership affordability. So if we can just sort of broaden that language to affordability standard, that would be great. Okay. Anything else that anyone sees as omitted from this work plan? Rachel.
Yeah, thank you, Skippy. Under the seller standards for maintenance and capital repairs, which I think we'll be discussing at some extent later on this meeting, it's interesting to me because this is part of the 2022 work plan. I do think it's going to take more time than just a few meetings to work this out. But I'd like to see research and analysis under that section in a manner that I'm not seeing. It just says complete the capital reserve regulation change. And, you know, from my estimations right now, we're kind of pulling numbers out of thin air. And I will expand on that when we get to that section of the agenda today. But for me, seller standards for maintenance and capital repairs, it's intricately related to so much financial analysis that we're just not doing. And, you know, I'll go into it further later, but for me, it needs far more research and analysis before we do regulation changes. And then secondly, I don't know how we're really, or maybe we talk about it under HOA capital reserves, but integrate the funding requirements of sellers into the reductions or the price changes or whatever we're thinking about. But we're now separating these things out so piece by piece that I don't feel like we're building an elephant. I think we're going to be building a camel, elephant, giraffe with 3 different pieces that are not necessarily integrated and congruent. And I just don't think we can fully separate those things out the way this seems to be going. Thank you.
Staff, do you have anything you want to jump in on that with? You don't need to. Just
No, I guess, Rachel, maybe I just don't understand the second piece about, are you talking specifically on HOA capital reserves?
Well, I think that needs to be integrated and acknowledged that, you know, I don't want to take an older dilapidated unit, tell the seller that they've got to reduce their appreciation by $20,000 so we can fix this unit up. We sell it to someone, and then the new owner gets hit with the first $5,000 special assessment because there is so much deferred maintenance and the capital reserves are deficient. And so you can't go back to the seller and ask them for another $5,000 then. You know, I just don't think there's an integration as needed about the totality of a unit. Any unit, maybe if it's a separate mobile home or a single family home and their only common elements are the sewer line, is one thing. But when your common elements are everything surrounding your unit in a condo, you're not doing anyone any favors by having a freshly painted and freshly carpeted unit if the deficiency is a magnitude of $20,000 or $30,000, so they can deal with the foundation repairs and mold in the basement and failing roof and boiler systems. And I think we've got some complexes like that. I see that we have to, in the future, integrate those two items as we're evaluating all the costs that we would like to take from the seller when they sell their units.
Rachel, that's really helpful. Thank you. I completely agree. And, you know, even as when Matthew comes on, I believe that HOA capital reserves is something like my assistant city manager predecessor is something that I will be very involved in. I completely agree that those will need to be integrated. And, you know, the hope is that we'll be able to tackle that in the nearer term. And simply that we're working on seller standards and capital repairs now because we can. So I'm with you.
Yeah,
Thanks.
and I agree with that. I understand that. I just would like it noted for the work plan that there shall be some future integration. And if we went back to the seller standards for maintenance and capital repairs, I do think that we need some more research and financial analysis. I still question, and we are not answering it, do we expect someone who has an family income capped at $75,000 to fully maintain a unit we sold them to for $200,000 that cost us $400,000 to build? And we're telling them they'll get X amount of appreciation each year, but they don't have any real source to go get that money and put it in their unit unless they get a second mortgage, which costs them money, or they ignore the problem until they sell, you know? And so I just don't think we're acknowledging what is a structural deficit between the incomes that we sell units to people for and the, we have nothing, as a board, we have nothing about what would it take to keep that unit up to something near new at 90% of near new when it's resold 20 years later. Is it 3% a year? Should there be 3% a year set aside for actually redoing these units and taking care of the furnace and roof?
Rachel?
Again, I don't think there's been analysis and research looking at it from the owner perspective and the long-term perspective of what we are expecting from income capped and appreciation capped participants in our program.
Rachel, does anyone want to jump in on that at all? Kelly?
It's a bit of a tangential thought, but No, Rachel, I mean, what you're saying to me, and probably perhaps inspired by a book I just finished that wasn't good, but had a related topic about like looking to like gentrified neighborhoods, right? Like how did the people who were living in those neighborhoods before they were gentrified kind of manage to stay in their homes, or you know, what programs like exist to like address that problem? So I don't know, it's just maybe it's a different way to sort of look at the same question that might offer some research outside of what can feel like a bubble, right? Like, oh, our program's so unique, you know, how do we even draw on lessons learned? It's just an idea for maybe one place to draw.
Thank you.
No, thank you. I appreciate that, Kelly. And I hope I'm explaining this dilemma well to folks, but, you know, I think we've started with the concept now of first turn, which is someone who maybe bought a unit 5 years ago when we weren't forcing better seller standards on someone, and so, or 10 years ago, we'll, you know, put it there. But on the other hand, I don't think we're acknowledging that for our sellers who might be selling from 30 or 40 years ago, they've done us a great favor by not having that appreciation base change and go up every 6 years. And they can be neighbors to a unit that has turned over 6 or more times in the same 30 years. And that unit will be selling for vastly more money, whether it's been improved or not, than the person who kept their unit nicely low priced and potentially has some value to put into the unit. We're kind of talking about allowing the seller to increase the value of their base appreciation price by putting unit money in, but not letting the existing seller increase their base price by making the same repairs themselves.
Rachel,
It's just gotten crazy.
Rachel, I got Francie and Kelly here with hands up. I think we hear you loud and clear. Francie, can you jump in since you had your hand up for a bit?
Yes, I just wanted to say I always love listening to your ideas, Rachel, but is it the idea that we're going to suss it out now, or that we're going to put it on the work list? Isn't that the idea that...
I'd love to see it on the work list. I'm just asking for more research and analysis of what we're actually trying to implement and how it affects this non-homogeneous pool of units. I just don't see one size fitting all.
Kelly.
Thank you.
Yeah, I've brought this up a bunch, but it's always been an idea, and never in the context of like whether the board supports working on it or budgeting for it. But you know, again, there are grant programs with money that we can access to help people pay for repairs. You know, I mean, they can be a grant or they can be a loan. And that money is there, it's on the table, it's available for application. You know, July 1st is the deadline for DOLA. So if this is something that we want to pursue, it seems like maybe something we'd put in the work plan somewhere. Or incorporate into a job description for a new hire that would come through the budget process or something. And I've always been the one to sort of throw it out, but I don't know if, you know, it seems like now is the time to like say whether we want to see it in a meaningful way and direct staff to include it.
Yeah. Carson.
To jump in without raising my hand,
Rachel,
I'll say yes, that should be added to the work
Rachel,
plan.
Carson's got his hand up if you don't mind.
So I mean, I
Sorry, I
think,
can't see all the hands.
I know.
I think Rachel makes a great point as far as I mean, certainly the HOA piece. I mean, there's some significant expenses there that we've got to figure out, and I think also the you know, more research and understanding what we're dealing with is also, you know, very important. But I also see that we have some existing standards in the regulations right now that just effectively go unenforced because, you know, if somebody comes in and has numerous items that don't meet what's already in the regulations, well, there's 40 people behind number one that'll take that property. And so, you know, in my mind, I do a little bit see that we can start to work on the seller standards and kind of focus on the interior of the unit. And in my mind, it's not so much the roof and you know, it's not so much the maintenance items. I think, again, Rachel's point about you've got somebody making $75,000 in a subsidized unit that has to go to the free market to maintain the unit. Certainly there's some concerns there. I think in my mind, more on the seller standards that I would really like to kind of correct with some of this is some of the stuff that's not so much related to maintenance. It's more neglect, or just like ignoring problems that sort of already exist, and sort of adding some teeth to the existing regulations to just say, look, if you've punched holes in the walls or whatever, we're not going to let you sell your unit. To me that there is a difference.
Okay. Awesome. So what we're doing now is having a great standards for sellers discussion, which is later on in the agenda. I want us to all remember everything that was just said so we don't repeat it. Focus back on this piece. And I think what I'm hearing, and you all tell me if I'm reflecting this correct, is everything in here is stuff that we want to do. We have some a pre-existing desire for the integration of some of these pieces, which we've already known ahead of time. We wanted to do these together, but we decided as a board, because of ongoing litigation, some other things, there was a piece we just couldn't touch right now, so let's work on the other and know that they're going to meet on the other side of the building. So, and this document is not about the how, it's about the what. There's a million things that are the tasks that have to go into this to get these done that are not listed here. So just looking at this and the what it's describing, are we comfortable with this as it is? And are we comfortable with staff bringing it back for this to be approved? And I'll ask that question, and then we'll bookmark everything we just said and bring it right back for standard sellers.
I think the one question I would have is around hiring. And, I've gone back and forth on whether we should be hiring somebody now for the capital repairs program, because I'm still in the camp of, I'm not sure it's ripe, but that's my personal opinion. And I have some thoughts about how we might be able to get that research done that Rachel's asking for, if that's something the board wants. But this question about, so we're talking about that one in the city's budget process, which is what we go through first before we bring it to the city council and the BOCC. That Kelly's question about a grants person, it is a very different position. We do not have the skill set, and to do it well, it takes time. And so I guess my question is, should we be looking to the county? Do we lose?
Okay.
Nope,
No,
they can
it's
still
just
hear us.
just
Great.
tab.
Okay. Should we be either asking for a position, asking for contract money, or looking to the city or county? I know the city doesn't have a grants person. I don't know if the county does. For support on that front. Because, Kelly, I agree, right? Other people's money is a great way to get something done. We do not have the ability or capacity to truly go after it right now.
Can I ask a follow-up on that? So OPM all day, right? Of course, if that opportunity is there, we should use it, and I would support using it. But like a company going out to raise your Series A, you need to know what you're raising on first. And so the question is that the position now, or would this year be about what are we actually raising on? What's the program we're doing? What is the need? And then that piece would come maybe 2023. And that's a question and not an answer.
It sounds like there's a short leash on that.
Yeah, I don't think the grant program needs a full needs assessment of essentially that would play into what the grant request would be. It's you can ask for $50,000, you can ask for $150,000, and so that's where some of that information plays in. I don't think that the grant application or standing up a program has to wait until all of that need is known.
Yeah.
But it is. I mean, it's literally would set up some sort of process to accept applications from the public to access money that we've applied for and hold and can use as a grant or a loan program. So there's it would require new rules set up by us. I mean, there's a lot that goes into it. So it's not, you know, I don't want to make it sound like it's not something that requires additional staff resources for it.
Rachel, again, you've frozen, but I heard you, so I'm wondering if your hand is up.
Yeah, my hand is up. Thank you. I want to support Kelly in this item being added to the work program as a general, pursue additional partnerships for grants and funding.
Yeah.
It was a priority of City Council last year. I don't think that we got anywhere with it in terms of pursuing additional resources for the broader housing program. But I do think it's time of the essence type of item. You know, the federal infrastructure bill, whatever it ends up being, the more you're shovel ready and the more you're prepared to put in a good application, the better your chances. And this is about protecting the public trust of the money we do have by pursuing other money and bringing it into the program. It may be that only, you know, lower income mobile homes end up being qualified for this, but it could be all of our units for energy efficiency upgrades, for climate change. And you guys have heard me say it before, I've said it in other boards and other meetings, but I think the housing office is the least resourced office we've had for far too long. We're finally, you know, really going to propose some policy analysts and additional support for this transition period and moving forward with an effective program. I think it would be better for me as a board member to put it forward and request the funding from the city and the county, and for me, if the city puts in a higher share, I will support that too.
Okay.
But to say this is what we need to really advance the community's goals, this is what we need to advance everyone's goals, not saying we know this would help us, but we don't have the money to get that money now.
Sure.
It's the old Emily's list, early money works like yeast, you know? You get some money going and it rises more. So I really think it's something to put in our work plan that we're going to pursue federal and state funding opportunities as they exist, and have the qualified personnel to assist us with that. And let our colleagues on our other boards turn us down if they don't want to pay for it.
Okay, so hearing support
Thank you.
from Kelly and Rachel, or Kelly, thank you for bringing this forward. Support from Rachel, Carson, and David. Is this addition that you guys can support? Do you have thoughts on this? And David, you can just speak up because I can't see you. You're frozen again, through no fault of your own.
I can let you know.
Oh, you can let me know. Oh, great. I'm an emissary.
What I'd recommend, and what I've, at least as a draft, added to the work plan is under the APCHA team item, and is approach this initially because it is new, as contract for and or hire, grant writer, and I also heard Kelly in the last, what you talked about last, also a grant program developer administrator, and it might be two different kind of roles, so it may be better that these are term positions that are contracted to pursue federal and or state funding.
Great.
And so we'll, Cindy and Bethany and I are going on Friday to have our first budget discussion, so we'll throw that in there. And right now that we've got 3 positions on the table, so we may come back and have a discussion about prioritization on that one.
Okay. David, is that how does that land with you? This discussion about this position.
Sounds great.
Okay.
I'm all in.
Carson. Yep. Francie.
Yeah, I was just wondering, wouldn't the rescue funds be applicable for some of this? I mean, isn't that something that we could be looking at?
Yeah,
Seems like-
again, it's just, do we want to dedicate like some sort of programmatic infrastructure to be able to churn the money, to get and churn the money?
I understand
you know?
that.
I think that's what's at the table right now.
Great. All right, so we have support to add that, and I'm seeing from your comments that that is something that we can add as a yes and. Okay. Any other things that we feel are omitted from this? We have a healthy list of things to do this year. Are you ready,
Actually,
Matthew?
let me address one more.
Yes.
So Rachel also brought up the research piece, and we can go into more detail, Rachel. I know as we go into the capital repairs discussion, seller standards discussion. Where I have that basically right now is in that we do have, and for right now, I believe the city is going to propose funding that, and it'll be mostly an APCHA position, but also partially a city position, a policy and data analyst position. So I put that is under the APCHA team, and that is the type of person who could pursue that kind of work.
Okay.
Although I also have another.
Okay, thank you, Diane.
Yep. Great.
Okay. So the last question I have is, are there any just stylistic format changes that are requested by anyone for this document?
Sorry. Oh, I said that out loud.
Yeah, just with your face and eyes. It's okay. We'll see if Carolyn reviews tape. Okay, Rachel, David, you guys are frozen, so speak up if you have any changes in this area in terms of format or presentation.
No,
Okay,
I'm fine with that.
thank you. Great, then I think that looks like, unless I see otherwise, board direction to make these final adjustments and bring it back for board approval?
Right, and actually, I went through the IGA this week. It does not require a formal board approval, and so I guess you could tell me tonight, hey, looks good, move forward.
I'd love to, I mean, even if it's a perfunctory 5-minute thing, just for the public, I'd love to be able to say, yep, that's our guy.
Okay.
Um,
You add that to next week's, the 15th.
Pause, we may be offline.
No, we're still on, we just keep, right?
I don't know, Rachel, David, can you hear us?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Oh, and actually, it is, right, Kelly, thank
Yeah,
you.
I'm so connected.
I'm watching them, I can see them live.
Oh, you can?
They're moving around.
Okay, sorry, we're having all kinds of technical stuff in the
Just
room,
in
guys.
here that we're having problems. Oh, we got him. You got him.
Woohoo. Okay, so thank you guys.
Video's on here.
Thank you guys for that heavy
Oh, on
lifting.
there, okay.
And for that preview of our next 2 discussions. So we've got an hour and 15 minutes left, hour and a half of discussion. We have 2 remaining items on our agenda, but they're really going to be discussed as one per staff discussion. So this is a revised deed restriction, which very much relates to the Standards for Sellers program that we are in the process of crafting. I'm going to ask board members, we just had a lot of discussion that's relevant to it, so I'll ask us to hold that stuff in our mind's eye, and I will do my best to reintroduce it into the conversation, but let's not repeat an hour of conversation. So staff is going to take us through this a piece at a time. We're not looking to solve, I checked in with staff before, we're not looking to solve this tonight. We're not expecting to have all the details worked out or the research done. What we're looking to do is move forward a consensus view of the board on how we want this to function, which can then inform further research from staff on the details of how this would be implemented, who it would affect and how, what are the budgetary consequences of that. So that could be brought back to us as well as other groups, for instance, City Council, who may be asked for some funds to support this. So we're looking for calling out the specifics we want staff to look into, an agreement on the general. That's what we're hoping to get to today, and then it will come back. So with that, I will turn it over to staff, and I think we're going to start with, well, CPI stuff, but you guys tell me.
Well, with regards to the deed restriction and the revisions that we're suggesting, the main reason is to try to give an incentive for people who are have older deed restrictions to want to go under our new updated deed restriction, because we do have a lot of different deed restrictions out there. So when I provided a lot of charts and information in on this memo for the board to look at and review. You can see how many, the number of units of the appreciation methodology and what we have out there. Also, towards the back of this specific memo every single unit that's in our inventory was, compared with when they initially bought it, if it had been at a 2.5%, what it would be today. And I have to tell you that if we had done all this stuff last year, the green and the reds would be totally different. The consumer price index has been going absolutely crazy. It's been increasing by a pretty leaps and bounds, a lot more than what I ever thought it would be doing. And usually when I see something like that, usually within 2 or 3 months, it starts to go down. And it can do some pretty big dips. I haven't seen that yet. We will get another one. It'll be interesting to see when we get August. We'll get August around the 10th or 11th of September to see what happens on that as well. So just to let you know, when you look at the charts, you're going to see more red than green. So it would not be as advantageous to go to a 2.5% at this point in time. What it would do is, for people who are at, like I'm at 3% or the consumer price index, whichever is less, down the line, or once it starts going crazy again, it would probably behoove me to go under a flat 2.5%, because the CPI can be all over the board. There were times when we had half a year where every single month it went down. And so if you could give a value to somebody 1 month, and then the next month it would be less. And they'd go, well, wait a minute, it's less than it was the month before. And that's because we get a new consumer price index every single month. And it did affect it negatively. So the only time, so if somebody wanted to refinance 1 month and they got that value, and then they didn't go forward and they wanted to refinance the next month and go forward with that, it could change their value down. Right now, though, with what we have, it's what we would do is, if somebody really wanted to go forward with that and you agreed that that made sense to do, what we would do is we would take somebody's value as of, say, today. If they've done any capital improvements, we would add that, and then they would start out with what we would call a new sales price. So that then it would start appreciating at that moment at 2.5%. Then they would also, from that amount, gain the 10% of capital improvements from that number. So it really helps somebody who's spent all their capital reserves. If they have an old deed restriction where they're very limited as to what they can do, our new deed restriction also allows, right now it also allows, if somebody can go above and beyond the 10% capital improvements, if they do health and safety items, if it has to do with energy conservation or water conservation, something like that, they can go up above and beyond that 10% cap. So that, for some people who are under older deed restrictions, that might be advantageous to them as well. Another thing that's in this deed restriction is we've kind of expanded on what we would classify as a capital improvement, because there is a fine line between a capital improvement or a maintenance and repair item. And for the longest time, we did not include carpet. So on this, we have added carpet, but it depreciates down, and carpet has a very short life. It has anywhere between a 5 to 7 year life. So it depreciates down. And then we also wanted to make it to where if you replaced carpet, you could only was it once every 7 years?
Carpet, we never.
Okay, we didn't. Okay.
Carpet was never an inclusion. Brand new.
Okay, yeah, it is a brand new item on that exhibit of the deed restriction that included additional stuff, and that is someplace in here. That's on page of the packet itself. It's on page 100. So that was some of the stuff that we took out some stuff and we added some stuff on that. And also anything that would benefit a senior or a handicapped, disabled person. So if somebody wanted to redo their shower or put in what do you call it, a sit-down shower or something, that would be something, usually it is for a senior person, and we would count that as a capital improvement. So that's kind of what we brought forward. Again, I don't know if you want us to expand more into some changes on here, if you want us to do more research on this. We just, right now, we need some direction from the board on what you would like to see possibly in proposed changes to the deed restriction.
Yep. So let's thank you for that. Let's start with just questions first, clarifications, questions on what's been proposed just in this updated deed restriction.
Okay.
Francie.
So Cindy, so if it's at 2.5% and that's reflecting the consumer price index, that's, for the whole country, but it doesn't seem like that's necessarily appropriate for this area. I mean, is there any kind of, I don't know, movable scale for like an area like this that has this incredibly high increase in value of properties consistently?
Well, consumer price, we use a specific consumer price index, and I can't tell you how that was picked, because it's the same consumer price index that was used in the late 1970s, early 1980s. So they've always used that specific one. If to change it at this point, because the numbers are changed and the formula that we use, I wouldn't even know where to go with at that point in time. That's one of the reasons why it's easier to almost go to a flat 2.5% and not use a different consumer price index. The consumer price index, and it's defined in our okay, because I can't remember.
Let me jump in for a second. Francie, part of it is philosophical. So affordable housing programs frequently will use something like a CPI, because what you don't want to do is rapidly increase the price of housing stock, because then it becomes unaffordable, or you have to do buy downs, which, as Rachel will tell you, we probably have to look at some point doing buy downs, just because so much of the stock is getting priced out of people's ranges, back to the affordability standard. When you look at, we were to do a market one, I don't know if I have this number right, but I thought I heard yesterday, like, over the past 4 years, this market has increased 20% from a housing perspective, right? And that would so it really gets back to a philosophical question of how much does the board want to move these products?
And so we specifically use the consumer price index for urban wage earners and clerical workers in the U.S., Midwest, and West, which is not seasonally adjusted. And I believe that's the same one the town of Snowmass uses for their housing as well.
Just, from the seller's perspective, it's pretty damn low.
Sure.
And I mean, I know it's like I was saying a couple of months ago when we were talking about this, and I was being the devil's advocate and saying, well, yes, but they get the advantage at the beginning when they get subsidized when they buy it to begin with. I mean, they get given basically a lot of money when they buy their property, and so their interest payments are way down and everything too. So that's true, and that's a huge benefit. But I'm just wondering, I mean, Carson, what do you think about the rate of valuation for properties here is just so steep right now.
It's a philosophical question, but I think all of this kind of goes back to the capital reserves and the maintenance and everything else. I don't think that employee housing is a place where you should, I don't think we should be paying a lot higher return. I think the 2.5%, 3% is fine. I do think that we need to work on the maintenance piece of it, because I don't think that the way it's currently set up encourages people to put money back into their house.
Right. And part of the disincentive is the 2.5% cap.
Right.
So, I don't know. If we're just talking about the difference between 2.5 and 3, 3 seems a little less severe.
Any other questions of staff, and then we'll get back to discussion. Rachel?
Yeah, it was more of an observation than a question.
Can we just do
And,
questions
I just
first,
wanted-
Rachel? Just I have a few questions as well, and I just want us all to have like the same information before we dig in.
Sure, thank you, Skippy.
Cool. Kelly?
Yeah, I'm looking at exhibits E and F, and I'm wondering in the table of units, is that include units where deed restrictions are expiring? Okay. Okay, so some of these, like past expiration, they could be free market, right?
It's what happens though is they're the older units, and we are starting to see turnover on some of those units. We do put new deed restrictions on them when they are turned over, so then they become back into perpetuity, and they're under the 2.5 or the 3 or CPI, whichever is less. So I mean, we saw a couple at Midland Park. There's through attrition, we are getting some of those back in. It's still over 20-something years before they go away, because they're all basically
Tied to Michael
based
Kinsley.
on Michael Kinsley. Yeah, yeah.
Sorry, Michael.
I get a real
So-
kick. People around the state laugh when I try to explain.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah. Okay, that was helpful for me to understand. And then I'm looking. So for Exhibit F, I sort of understand it, except for I guess I don't understand all. I mean, is that an entry for all 1,000?
Well, it
1161?
Really is. Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Precise.
Thanks.
Great. So other questions, not seeing any from David. When I first saw the number for deed restrictions that would sunset, this was probably 2 years ago now, it was 502. Somewhere in here I read that this would affect a limited number, I think it was 82, and I'm wondering, how have we closed that gap so significantly, and did I read that correct?
Some of them, well, I don't ever remember the 500 number.
I have the list, if it's helpful.
I do know that at one point in time, my understanding was that Castle Ridge does go away. I've talked to their attorney. He directed me to language in the deed restriction, and it does not. It is in perpetuity. There are, Centennial is one that does. There are some ownership units, the older ownership units, but again, when they turn over, we put brand new deed restrictions on them. And then the rental units will eventually go away. Who knows, that could change if with regards to what the new owner wants to do right now. There's also.
So part of the difference is
Yes.
this is not counting those.
Yeah.
Yep, that's
Yeah.
a big deal.
That,
So that's
okay,
it.
that's it. Got it. Okay, that makes sense to me. Following up on this red-green graph, when we saw this last time, and I know CPI has gone crazy, but we were looking at a 20-year look back, so a 240-month average, and it was, I think, between 1.3 and 1.9 was the average. Now we've got some high months, but we only have a couple months. How did it flip so many things into the red?
Well, I think that also we didn't use it. I used one project. This is
Everything.
everything. So it gives you more of a perspective of who would benefit and who wouldn't out of all of this.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the reds, if you look to see how long somebody's owned it, well, some of them are new. People have just bought within the last 6 months or whatever, and it would affect them negatively because the CPI has gone crazy on those. And some of them are because they are at a flat 6%. Some RO units are in here too, and some of them are a flat 4%. So there are some that no matter what, you're not going to be able to, no matter what you do, unless you decide to go as high as 6%, you're not going to change the deed restrictions
Right.
on some of these
Yep.
until they go to sell. And then we always have the right of first refusal on that. So that's one of the reasons why we changed the deed restriction on all of them, and we do what we call a double deed. So it's sold to us and then immediately sold to the qualified household.
Right. So then the last question that follows, because we have three, what I would describe as very good and strong incentives in here to change, and we want people to change so that all this other work we're doing, standards for sellers, et cetera, can be included. But we have one effective disincentive. If we, would you guys recommend either bumping up that number? Like if we went to 3%, would that turn greens to red? Or would you recommend, if we view that as a disincentive, just dropping the change of the appreciation and keeping the other three incentives, and then that would serve as a better incentive overall as a package?
Possibly.
Yeah, I mean, we could, it's
Yeah.
an interesting question, because given the number and what the CPI is doing, right, and we all know the Fed's paying attention to this and will likely move if it keeps going for some period of time. But it may be worth saying, hey, we're just gonna offer this and we're not gonna touch the appreciation, but we wanna reset the
The other
capital.
stuff.
Yeah, and particularly the capital, and then, you know, we don't know if we're gonna get the people, it isn't that many, but we do have fair number that have the, you know, that are not required to follow the regulations as updated from time to time.
Okay.
And there might be, who knows, or maybe there's another type of incentive besides that as well that we can put in there, because there are some people where their capital improvements were 10% of the original purchase price. That's it. Doesn't depreciate down, but you're locked into that 10%. So by going under a new deed restriction like that, if you're not changing the percentage or the appreciation, you might get somebody to do that, because now they can get credit for capital improvements after that.
Yeah.
So there might be some other incentives that maybe we can work with and not touch that appreciation to get people under a more updated deed restriction.
Okay. Carson, did you have a direct answer? Because otherwise I want to let Rachel kind of kick off the discussion piece. Okay. Rachel, do you want to,
Can I just have
one
a
more
follow-up
question?
question
Yeah,
to
wait,
that?
Kelly, one more
So
question.
let me.
Yeah.
Sometimes I confuse myself in a circle. So the proposal then would be your capital appreciation could be 10% of the current valuation of your unit, not the original, not the.
Right.
You know, okay.
Okay.
And reset. So even if you've spent money and you have capital improvements that haven't depreciated down, it's new appreciation possibility.
It's 10% of that new amount.
Of that new amount.
You would
on
take your
top of-
appreciated value and add what capital improvements you've done and start brand new at 10% from that value
Right.
at the same appreciation cap that you've got, but you would start with a new 10%.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay. So Rachel, if you could kick off our discussion, and what we would hope to do is give staff the okay to move forward. They adopt these administratively, but we're having this discussion so that something could be moved forwards, and then we can get into the meat of the standards for sellers discussion.
Okay, well, first, I think this should be adopted by the board as opposed to just administratively, in a way, to have the board standing behind it.
Sure.
But I'm not going to question the administrative authority. It seems like we should be standing behind it. I would just kind of point out, I was looking at the chart, and when you get down to all the, if you look mostly in the number of months owned column, which is kind of hard because the headers are only on some of the column sheets. But, most of those ones where people have been around for 400 months or 380 months, they're more likely to be those deed restrictions that will expire. I know I'm one of them at Hunter Creek Condominiums because I've owned there since 1988. And so they're the ones that seem to be the most in the red and pretty heavily if you look at the 6% appreciation on this list. So I certainly wouldn't hold up this change or any changes. I think the proof will be in the pudding later if we see a lot of people choose to come in and get a new deed restriction. But in terms of financial incentives, I don't know that it really is for the people we wish to get to do this the most. And so that's a little bit of a concern for me. And I don't like the idea that we're going to be jiggering it back and forth again and again. Hopefully, if inflation comes under control, but I've seen and lived through times when it wasn't. And so we'll have to see where that goes. You know, the one thing about these inflation numbers is that they're just, consumer price index has always been based on a lot of very static things, as opposed to a lot of the other things that can rise very quickly and change very quickly, although they're not as large a component of people's bills. So, you know, when consumer price index is figured that the majority of people have 3 and 4% interest rates on their homes, the rising price of gasoline or other things doesn't affect, because they're smaller portions of someone's annual spending type issues. So CPI is an imperfect gauge, I guess, is the bottom line, as others have said. You know, and then I just was really curious. I was starting to do the math on one of these 6% CPIs that kind of looked like it might be my unit, because it was sold for $64,000 originally. And it says I have 400, or somebody who bought one for that price has 407 months at 6% CPI. Excuse me, the flat 6% or CPI if it's higher. I've just been confused by what are people really expecting versus their property tax bill that comes in. I've gotten, my most recent one said it'd be $188,000, but I kind of look at this chart and I think, God, maybe it's only $151, and I'm overpaying my property taxes. And, you know, as I've raised that question before, how do people get rebates on their property taxes if they're not allowed to sell for the rate at which they've been paying property taxes for a decade? So that's kind of a challenge.
Rachel, how many months did you say?
Otherwise, if people want to give this a try and see if anybody signs up, you know, that's not going to be something that holds me back. I think that if anybody does sign up, I asked 2 questions. One is, will it affect their mortgage that they have a new deed restriction, and will they have any cost going to the bank to get the okay to have a new deed restriction on their existing mortgage? And how will that flip things for that homeowner, or is that a new cost to them, a new hassle? And then second, yeah, we'll just, if it does change in the future, I would like to make sure that anyone who does change their deed restriction and sees, hey, now they're offering a 3% rate or something like that, could have a very easy course to getting that new deed restriction as well. But I think we need to answer, will it impact anyone's home mortgage to try to take advantage of this program, and do they need to requalify or do a new mortgage or what?
And that's something that I really and truly don't know why it would, because their value would be higher so than what their mortgage is. So we can check with some lenders.
I know, but those bankers have strange rules, Cindy.
Yeah, we can check with some lenders. I don't see it, but.
I mean, I would think that if you're gonna record a new deed restriction, the bank would need to, would need to allow that.
Thanks, Rachel. That's great. Thanks for bringing it down to the specific. Carson, did you want to jump in?
I mean, I personally, I think that, we can, I think as Rachel said, we can try this and see how many people sign up for it. I think until we have a full understanding of how this is going to impact capital reserves and everything else, I don't think we're going to have a lot of interest in just voluntarily signing up for a new deed restriction just to get an additional 10% of appreciation.
Yeah, 10% of appreciation plus sort of the unlimited on the environmental improvements, which could be paired with core grant.
Well, but as I understand it, I already have that on mine. Like
Some of the newer ones already have it.
Right.
Okay.
But you would get a new 10%. So if you'd
Right.
spent your
For you, it's
10%,
just
Yeah.
that. So I have a question, if it's okay with for you, Rachel, because you brought up potentially your specific case, potentially not. So let's just pretend it's yours to do the math. I was just doing this. So if you bought for $64,000 and you've got 470 months, and it's 6% per year.
Per year.
407, not 70.
Yeah, but it's not compounded, right?
Right.
It's just a flat.
Just a simple, yeah.
It's just a flat. So if you made this change, your basis going forward for appreciation would change significantly. So if you kept that 6%, presumably that would be interesting to you. But if you had to drop to 2.5 to accept the new basis, then that kind of comes out in the wash and would probably not incent you. Is that a fair evaluation?
You know, I'm not sure what would incentivize me enough to come in. You know, again, it just, you know, I think that the thing that's maybe not emphasized enough is that people would get to collect whatever their current appreciation value would have been, and then reset with a new deed restriction, and then start at the 2.5%, and by bumping up the base, you know, you kind of equalize things for people who had a much longer tenure and history in the unit. On the other hand, speaking as an APCHA board member, I've kind of brought up the idea of, hey, shouldn't we do these home inspections when people refinance so they don't take all of their equity out of the unit? And we may be setting that up by saying, hey, now you have your full appreciation price without us coming in to see if maybe there's $20,000 or $30,000 worth of damage here or repairs that need to be made. I have no idea what it would cost me to rebuild my bathroom. And it's a 40-year-old bathroom with the original fixtures from the rental project, so that it was before it was converted to ownership. So I have no idea myself personally if I should do that and then take the money out in a brand new loan and try to fix it up so I keep my maximum resale later, or what? You know, I mean, I think people are really going to have a lot of hesitancy about knowing how it will play out for them in their personal life, dollars and cents.
So I just did some back of the napkin, front of the computer calculator math, and the, you know, the rough annual appreciation on the 64 is like $3,800 a year. If you reset to the new appreciated value, so you add $130K to that value, 2.5% of that new value is $4,800 and a bit a year. So it's an extra $1,000 a year appreciation going forwards, despite the drop in percentage. Do you have any read on whether people would care enough about that to do it, plus these other incentives around the reset of 10% and environmental stuff? I mean, assuming that that's how it plays out.
Yeah. You know, again, Skippy, when people make big money moves like that, it takes a lot of time and consideration. And I think that it would be like the outreach would really be needed to help walk people through why this is better for them instead of why this is not, and let them think through the variables. I mean, it's just like purchasing a home in the first place is a very big step for people. Changing things up is a big step too. So I really can't say yes, it would be enough, or no, it wouldn't be enough. And, you know, the one thing in the new deed restriction is the clause that says, and you will comply with any regulation changes as APCHA board produces them from time to time. And once you've signed up to that, how do you know that what the new appreciation they just gave you here won't be moved back down to 1%? You know, how do you know what you will be asked to do when there's an open-ended clause in the new deed restriction that you don't have now? I know other people do, but that says you will comply with whatever rule changes APCHA makes in the future. That has a big question mark next to it, and potentially a price tag for people that's unknown right now.
Kelly? Bless you.
Excuse me, sorry.
Yeah, I guess I wonder though, is,
Yes. I have to sneeze through my mouth, sorry.
I was thinking in my mind of appreciation as a different, and as not a regulatory item. You know, that's a contractual item.
That's in the deed. It is in the deed restriction, and someone would have to agree to it.
So,
Okay.
you know, there's a little.
So that
there's
can't
some,
be changed.
Yeah,
Right.
so there is a little bit of, I think, protection there for that.
But how much
concern.
can be taken away on resale could be changed.
Mm-hmm.
The livability standards, any of the other standards could be changed.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, I'm struggling with this one. Like, to me, it's almost like, oh, well, for me, whose unit appreciated at 1.1%, you know, I'm already under the new deed restriction. Why wouldn't I just sign up for another deed restriction and get, you know, like that's sort of quick math for me.
That's why I said I'm not interested in stopping this. Let's see if it does enough.
I mean, I do think like the hurdle of having to go back to your mortgage company and sort of get agreement on that might be enough.
Well, I'll talk
for
to
me.
some, I'll talk to some lenders
honestly,
on that
to
and
say like, I'm not gonna, I don't know, I'd really have to do that math out, to see the headache factor, for that. So, yeah, I'm just, and again, I want to call out a little bit, Rachel, the concern that you raised with like the people who are in the, you know, the 400, 500 months, you know, right now, you know, whether this incentive exists or not, we may get the opportunity to have a new deed restriction on that unit anyway, right? So,
That's right.
Because 20 years is a long time, you know, on top of
Actuary
500, on top of 400 months of living somewhere, another 20 years is a very long time. So I would bet the odds would be that that unit is going to come under a new deed restriction anyway.
I agree. Very likely.
So I'm sort of like talking myself out of this, to be honest.
Francie, you're looking contemplative. Do you have anything?
I'm just trying to figure out the balance between the appreciation and the deed restriction. I'm gonna do a little research.
Okay. David, I can't see you, but do you have anything to add here? Okay, I think that's a no. Well, I appreciate staff's work on this. I mean, I think that this is a critical piece to move forward to bring people under the system that we are now co-creating. As Rachel said, I don't think it really has a huge downside to put into the wild, but I do question. Go.
Oh, keep going.
Oh, yeah. I do question looking at the math. If we've hit the right number and targets for that, and I wonder if a 3% would be more appropriate. I don't see 3%, but in fairness, right, in full disclosure, at the beginning I was wondering if 2.5 was too low. And I don't see 3 as sort of breaking the bank on the affordability in the system. And perhaps it could provide a better tool, knowing a lot of these reds are older units. If they raise their basis, that it could bring them in. And so I wonder if we could move something forward that would include these elements here, plus 3%, but then, as Rachel said, do some kind of active field testing. Take all the red names in the database, throw them in the raffle machine, pick the first 20, and have someone from staff go and actually introduce one-to-one and walk people through these changes. And then see, did we get 20, 18, 1? And what was the reason? And perhaps use that as the mechanism for deeper understanding.
Do we have staff who can do that?
I don't know, they're in the room, they could tell us.
That sounds like.
I'll do some more research on this and see what.
Okay.
And I'll also check to see what, if somebody has an older, if you change it and you're now during your appreciation off the higher amount, does that matter? Are you getting more appreciation on a yearly basis? So maybe that's the way to push it. So like you're at a flat 3, you're at 6%, but this is what you're getting based off of this value.
Mm-hmm.
So now if we change it and you go under new deed restriction, and whether it's at 2.5% or 6%, but we're basing it off of that new value, does that really push the incentive over. So let me do some more work on this. I'm not gonna bring it back at the next meeting,
Okay.
but I'll work on this and try to bring something back with a little bit more information, in October, if you're okay with that.
Kelly?
Yeah, I also am just wondering, I don't know, what if we don't do depreciation? Like, what if you like just get the 10%, and then every, I don't know, 15 years, you can get another 10%, something like that. Like, I wonder if that would incentivize people to just like, okay, like, as opposed to, because then you would do the work all along your ownership of it, right? As opposed to like, oh, I'm going to wait and I'm going to do it right at the end before I sell, because that's when I'm going to get the best bang for my buck. It's just an idea.
It does push price.
Mm-hmm.
It's gonna push price.
And look, I'm gonna apologize for making a last comment on this as well. I do think it should go forward, and whether it's one-on-one or inviting 15 people to a common meeting to answer their questions together, but I do think, as Skippy has said, field testing it will make a real difference. But I personally would love to see us be able to move away from the whole appreciation, non-appreciation, subtracted from appreciation, and see if there was just something that was like a return on investment. That we know you just put $40,000 to buy this place down, and you will get 1% appreciation on your down payment, that's your guaranteed return of investment, no matter what else you do. And going along with this, and we're going to talk about later should there be public funds to make up shortfalls and things like this. I really think that a lot of people, especially your lower income categories, have a hard time saving up the $5,000 or $10,000 to do a major repair. And again, without going to get a second mortgage or a higher line of home improvement loan and the money to go with that, that's why people are deferring a lot of their maintenance. I don't know that the couple who earn $75,000 and have one child and are trying to save for their college, if they care if the bathroom fixtures are 20 years old, because they can't save enough to redo the kitchen and add it on for their 10% capital. And how do we make someone's, quote, appreciation more available to them to use before selling, and to do what we want them to do with it and keep the unit up? But right now, some of our people could go into the bank to get that home improvement loan because they know the unit needs it and they're still going to leave there for 10 years, but they don't qualify for that loan. So that's our challenge is appreciation is entirely unusable until you sell. And I'd love to see us cure that aspect of it. Thank you.
Thanks, Rachel.
Hey, that's what I'm hoping my loan program can do.
How's that possible?
Right. Okay, so thank you, Rachel. That's a really good point. So what do we want to do with this? You've heard Rachel say, kind of put something in the field. Staff would like to look at this and bring it back. In terms of process, what are we comfortable with here?
Other than what Cindy
For
said?
me, if Cindy wants a little more time to work on it, that's fine. But again, at some level, we're just going to have to field test whatever comes out.
Yeah. So Cindy, what specifically would you be looking at and bringing back that would be different than what we have in front of us now?
Well, looking at what it would do by changing it, figuring out what somebody's appreciation is now on an annual basis based on what they first purchased it for versus what it would be if they went under a new deed restriction at like now. And then maybe look at I know some people who are in these places, maybe ask some of them if they could realize this, would they be interested in going under new deed restriction?
I'll add one piece to what Cindy said. I think that's right. I think that's the field testing piece. I think I want to talk with these folks about, do we think that APCHA gets sufficient value if we were to completely cut
Yeah.
the piece out of it that has to do with appreciation, leave their current appreciation, but keep the pieces where we give them a reset on the, on capital repairs, the capital, improvements, reserve amount, and also that we get them into a standard deed restriction, and that, as, and the language about it as updated from time to time. If that is sufficient benefit to APCHA, if we would recommend that to the board as an alternative.
Okay, so what I'm hearing, tell me if this is correct, is that we will be looking at two things. We'll be looking at, should we just cut that, and if so, does that equation balance for APCHA in a way that you could recommend to us? And if we should keep that, what is the new appreciation number that will substantially capture the audience that we are hoping to include through a voluntary acceptance of this new deed restriction, and that those two pieces will come back to us in a form that, because of process, we could say at that meeting, yes, please put that into the wild.
And I think the one modification would be, Skippy, that we'd be looking at, yes, the appreciation, as you said, but also the other, we'll be talking to those people about the other elements of it, right? Because it's a package. Does this package look attractive to you?
Yes. Does that sound good to everyone?
Yeah, I have a question about the appreciation in terms of what Rachel said. There is a way in which appreciation does affect you before you sell, and that is if you refinance. So if your property appreciates and you go in and the rates go down, and you go in to get a new loan, you're going to qualify for a lower rate loan more easily if your property is appreciated. So that is one significant gain that you do get with appreciation. Especially with the way the rates have been so low lately, and some of these properties got their mortgages quite a long time ago.
Yeah.
That's a fairly substantial benefit.
Rachel, is your hand back up?
Yeah. Yeah, just one kind of really minor thought for all of us. The original premise of the appreciation caps was so that the units would not rise out of the affordability of the category. Said another way, that wages would rise roughly at the same rate as CPI.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it might be a very interesting experiment for us to take all those same appreciation numbers that Cindy has compiled for the last 20 years and say, what would that have done to a $10 an hour wage? And have our wages really risen at the same rate that our CPIs have? And I mean, was the original premise of what appreciation caps would do, has it succeeded? Or has it actually artificially kept the resale prices lower because wages have risen far more than the 1%, 1.8%, 0.9% added up over those many 20 years? I don't know, but was the premise successful? And by understanding its shortcomings, maybe we understand more what to do in the future.
That's a great point.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would love to see that. Okay, sounds like staff has direction on this piece. Yes. David, I can't see you. Anything else, brother?
It's a very fascinating discussion, and certainly a lot more than we can get through tonight. And I think everybody's made some excellent points, and we're going to have to continue to dig into this for a while. I don't think this is a quick decision.
Yeah, appreciate it. It sounds like staff will have something for us to hopefully move forward in a couple meetings. So October surprise. All right. I want to take board's temperature right now. The last thing on our agenda is a meaty one. Rachel's already had the opportunity to raise some really great points. I'm not so sure we can get through all this in a half hour, but we can certainly give it a shot. So do we want to jump in for 15 minutes, or would we rather table this, or maybe just go around and offer some opening thoughts and then come back and start the next meeting with it when we are fresh?
Where are we going with it? Are we hoping to get to a decision on something tonight, or is it just further discussion?
The goal was to agree to a framework of what we want to see happening, and then task staff with sort of the further in-depth research, financial underpinnings that would allow that to happen, which they would then bring back to us and other interested parties. For instance, if part of the ask is for funding from the city, that would then be shared with council so we can make some decisions. Rachel?
Yeah, thanks. Skippy, I guess I thought we were also going to discuss, perhaps, to the extent people are interested, more aspects of the sample deed restriction than just the percent interest appreciation rate. I at least have a couple comments on it, and I don't know if others did, but I thought we were looking at the new proposed master deed restriction in its totality.
We're also looking at all the capital improvement stuff and the rest. What specifically, or is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
you know,
please,
but again,
jump in.
I don't
Oh, my
know if
God.
others want to discuss that now, but I thought that's kind of meaty as well, and maybe we could finish that more thoroughly with the remaining time.
The deed restriction is what we're talking about now, so please jump in with additional comments.
Okay, hey, thank you so much for that. And some of these might be a little more questions for staff to consider and our board members. But as I was looking at pages 91 and 92, if I can find those up again, for an item that kind of switches around here, and for me, it's a little more of a sequencing thing, but it's only at the very last item E that we say, to obtain the maximum resale price, owner must ensure at the time of sale property meets APCHA's applicable minimum standards. And I think maybe it's not A, but it should be B, that needs to be really highlighted. And I think we're kind of cutting and pasting a little with our old deed restriction, but now that we're really talking about some very significant changes in terms of how much appreciation can be deducted from someone when they sell, that needs to be highlighted really, really clearly for future buyers. It both increases their, potential compulsion to keep their unit up, but no one can say they didn't know about it. And so I really see that should be there. And as we finish the conversation, it should be very clear in that section how low it can be reduced down to. I just think that, as I've said, every future buyer is a future seller, and you want them to know exactly what they're getting into. There is another component in here, and I think it also related more directly to foreclosures, but I'd like further explanation for myself and for the public later, but that APCHA reserves the right to acquire a unit and then resell when setting its own price. And that sounds a little funny to me, if you were telling someone, well, if you sell now, we're going to take X amount of appreciation out, but maybe this gets used during that deed-to-deed transaction, and APCHA sets its own selling price. It's raised this question of why have we kept the current owner down so much rather than letting them increase their price and make the improvements that we were asking for without taking it out. So
wait a minute, Rachel, I don't understand what you're saying. Because when somebody's going through foreclosure, they don't have any money to make it right. So how can you tell, well, if we add this to you and to your price? I'm confused on that.
Well, I guess I'm just confused. Are we clear it's going to be limited to foreclosure? And there's other questions further in, and you're right, Cindy, maybe I'm mixing up some of the worksheet we were talking about later on in the program about APCHA being able to readjust prices higher to make further improvements on a unit and then sell it. And if the new buyer doesn't use all the money that was allocated, it gets returned to APCHA, you know, there's just a lot of back and forth here, and it's gotten very confusing to me. Why, I just feel the loss of appreciation is not as clearly stated as it should be, and also the highlighting that people will be complying with changes to guidelines as they may occur from time to time, and what that may entail, because it could entail things like your resale commission. And
I see him.
you know, I just am looking for
Just looking
clarity.
for a window. Hey, Rachel,
In the
sorry, Tom has his
jurisdiction
hand up very high. He's,
Okay.
it looks like he's going to lose it. What you got, Tom? You're muted. Tom, we can't hear you. Hold on.
He's like, well, I never muted myself. Why am I muted?
Exactly.
You gotta unmute yourself.
Can you hear me now?
There you are.
Yeah.
Bring it home.
Got me? I gotta get this fixed for the next meeting. Anyway, so, to respond to Rachel, there are two circumstances that I can think of off the top of my head where APCHA acquires units. One is if they're in foreclosure and we are at risk of losing them to the inventory. Sometimes when that happens, well, you've got to pay off all the debt that's ahead, that is on the property, and sometimes we have to pay off second liens and things so that the new buyer, after APCHA decides to sell it, put it back on the inventory and sell it, APCHA wants to recoup some of the money it's invested in that property. And generally, we can do so without busting the maximum resale price, or sometimes if we do exceed it, it's not astronomical. The second reason is that we buy the units to fix them. They're not marketable, or there's a situation where the buyer and the seller can't get it figured out, and APCHA steps in, buys the unit, and pays for some repairs. So that's why it's in there about APCHA resetting the resale price. It's about APCHA recovering its investment, and that's the only reason.
Okay, you know, you're right, Tom. I'm probably very clearly confused between the two and the potential other items we're thinking about as we go forward. But let me ask you about this one then. This potential deed restriction changes the PCI, and I'm good with that. And more PCI can be added onto your unit cost. But can that PCI that you got the new 10% actually later be reduced down out of the appreciation for seller standards, or is that 10% kind of, you know, off limits? I'm
not sure I understand that question.
Okay, well, we're talking about
appreciation. You have an appreciation cap. Everybody has one, and
yes.
if you increase, you're just increasing the number. You're not increasing how we treat that number when someone wants to sell their property, right?
Well, we're telling them that some of these things do not depreciate down anymore.
Oh, if we're telling them they don't?
Others do depreciate, but when someone goes to actually sell, will they be able to say, but wait a second, this was my 10% I was allowed to add on with my new deed restriction. You can't tell me that you're reducing me down to just 0.5% a year or something like that, because this deed restriction says I can add 10% on.
That language is not in this deed restriction. We didn't add that in this deed restriction, did we?
It's not clear. It's just out there that
well, it's in there. I don't know why we would treat the initial capital improvement expenditures any different from this additional round. I mean, it's standard procedure on capital improvements to reduce their value by whatever the depreciation formula is. Why would you not treat them both the same?
I'm just wondering if we're offering a new deed restriction that is offering new benefits that people can potentially add to their base price, that we do not startle them later 12 years down the road and say, oh, didn't you realize that was subject to being reduced down to only 0.5% if we don't believe you've
Okay,
kept the unit
so
up
here's what I
to
think.
standard.
We
And I
have to
just
be
don't
fair
think
to
there's enough,
everybody.
I just don't think there's enough disclosure in this, Tom, and pointing out what people are buying into.
Rachel, can we let,
Disclosure, I agree with completely. But if you're not gonna depreciate on this incentive you're talking about, I don't think you can depreciate for other people who are sticking with the original program. How can you treat the two differently?
I want the same to be treated the same. I just want it to be somewhat bolded or more clearly called out in this deed restriction.
Rachel, can you let
It's not in
Cindy-
this deed restriction at this point in time. That's not in this deed restriction at this point in time. That's something
That's
that we
right.
have talked about, but that is not in this deed restriction.
We didn't put that in there.
No.
Okay,
Okay, I'm
Kelly,
sorry, I thought we were working on the future deed restriction that the city is gonna be able to use on the Burlingame units when they come up for resale in the future, as was asked of us. And I thought we were working those things in, and that is, it's in the lower half of the memo to be future added to the deed restrictions. I thought it should be discussed now.
okay,
Well, that's just,
so I just want to turn
that's
to,
just not something we put in the proposed deed restriction, because when we worked up the proposed new deed restriction, which was some time ago, this element that you're talking about now wasn't even on the table, I don't think, so.
Yeah, and Rachel, I think your point is an interesting one, because heretofore I've thought of it as something that would be in the regulation, but I think it is something we should highlight or reference in a new deed restriction in the future. So I think that's a good point. And my perspective is that I kind of feel like we're so not there yet on that particular item about how are we going to address the who pays for what.
yeah, and Rachel, we're going to talk about all that stuff at the next meeting. Kelly, do you have additional thoughts?
I think
No?
I'm cleared
Okay.
up now.
Is there anything else anyone wants to add on this revised deed restriction that staff will be bringing back with the things we discussed sometime in October? Kelly?
So I'm just, I'm tired, it might be in here, I might be missing it, but, I want to make sure that we're avoiding the situation that happened at 16 Ajax where someone was able to take a loan out in excess of what the value of their property was.
The issue is, we don't always know.
I know, I'm just
There
wondering
are some
though-
lenders out there that go behind our back.
I see it, Tom.
They know it's deed restricted, and they do not check with us. And this has happened before. It has also happened basically with the same bank at another property. And they ended up losing it. They ended up having to take it as a loss. So in fact, I think the majority of the lenders contact us to verify the price of what something can sell for, so it doesn't go over. This property went into
But Cindy,
foreclosure
that's
3 or
not
4
the answer.
times.
Tom, I see you. I'll get to you.
But this property went into
It's not the
foreclosure
answer.
3 or 4 times, and the banks kept bailing him out.
Okay. Tom, can you clarify?
The answer is that we caught this problem years ago. It is prohibited by the deed restriction for anyone to borrow money in excess of its maximum resale price. It's a violation of the deed restriction, and they can be required to sell the property for doing that, and they can't get more than the maximum resale price. In addition, a foreclosing lender who lends money that exceeds, that puts the price over that limit, they're not entitled to the money because the deed restriction is already recorded and it has that prohibition in it. So we've covered this. Now, can someone break the rules and do it anyway? Sure, but I would argue that they're not entitled to recoup that money and their resale price, nor is that lender entitled to get that money because it was a violation of the deed restriction which they were on notice of.
So then my follow-up question is there a place to clarify how clear title can get transferred when those are broken?
We can't.
Because the problem
well, I'm
was
not
the
sure I fully
buyer was the
understand.
one that got screwed here. I mean, a bunch of people got screwed here, but like the buyer is the one that
Right.
like really like had to shoulder a burden related to a problem that they had no creation of. So is there something
Well, the
in the
buyers-
deed restriction that a mortgage company would read that's like you are still going to transfer clear title to this if this gets broken?
Well, here, we
I don't know.
can't
A
control
suggestion
clear title.
perhaps to chew on.
But here's because the problem with 16 AJAX is one was the condition of the unit, but the other problem was liens on the property.
Mm-hmm.
Liens that exceed the value of the property. And some of them were judgment liens. The owner got sued for breach of contract and lost. And the winner put a lien on the property to establish a judgment lien to get the money when it's property sold. We can't stop somebody from getting sued and getting judgments against them. That's a risk that's built into the property law legal system. We can't stop that.
Can you, Kelly, just to wrap this up, Ubo, could
Yeah.
you
No,
possibly
it's okay.
restate that observation in the form of a request of what you would like staff to look into to see if it can be solved for, and if it has majority support, we can add that to the list and it can come back in October?
The outcome I would hope for is that the violations of the deed restriction enacted by the owner, seller, and the bank, should not be shouldered on in the prevention of clean title from a new buyer.
Okay. Is that something we're comfortable having staff?
I don't know if that's possible.
I don't know if we can
I
do
don't know.
that.
You don't think, if it's a non-starter, it's a non-starter. Do we know that now?
No, I think it's a
Because
great
to me,
idea.
the deed restriction is
Right?
like a bank may likely not read through all of our changing regulations, right? But like a deed restriction, like that their name is on, that's getting recorded, is like the first document on the top of the pile, right? So that's sort of where I think you have the opportunity to like call out some real specificities. But
Do we know that to be a non-starter, or is it possible there is a solution to that?
I think
Look at
that
it.
we
Okay.
can look at it, yeah.
Okay, and is the board comfortable majority looking at that?
John just turned his video on. Does
Yes.
he have?
Okay, great. All right,
Hi,
so
John.
let's add that.
John.
Hey, John,
John.
just in time.
in here.
Okay, so we can add that to the list of things to look at.
Comment on that, Skippy, I'm sorry, I was going to comment. I think that's a non-starter. I mean, Tom's answer is the correct one, that it's in the deed restriction. Most banks look at this property as, you shouldn't, they made a mistake. They loaned over the value, there's liens, whatever else. The only way to get it out is foreclose it out. They lose both on the whole thing, right? I mean, but it's a non-starter that you can't convey clean title. I mean, the only way to get clean title in that situation is the foreclosure.
Does that?
And that's a process. That's a process. Home ownership, 100%, are lending across the board. It takes time. Unfortunately, it's going to take a period of time for these people to get through it.
But it doesn't happen as often as it used to because of that provision in the deed restriction that we added some years ago when we had a couple of people, Cindy will remember this, this was probably 15 or 20 years ago, where we had 2 or 3 people in a row we found who had got second loans that exceeded the value of the property because the lenders hadn't checked against maximum resale price before making the loan, which is beyond belief to me, but that's what happened. So we put it in the deed restriction that it's a violation to get that additional loan if it pushes the resale price, or if the value of the loan goes beyond the maximum resale price. So it's curbed the problem quite a bit as far as I can tell. I haven't seen that happen before this 16 AJAX situation. And that's not really so much because of the second lender as because of judgment liens against the property.
Okay, thank you, Tom. Kelly, does that sort of?
yeah, that's fine.
That's okay. All right, great. So I'd like to close this discussion of our revised deed restriction. Staff will be bringing something back in October. Our last item, standards for sellers and capital reserves, will come back at our next meeting. If you've had so much fun here, please come back and join us September the 15th. It will be at the top of the meeting, so we can get into that big meaty topic 21st. Thanks for hanging in there with us. And with that, we'll move to the last part of our agenda, which is optional board members' comments. And I would look for any raised hands for anyone who has anything to add to this meeting. And Kelly.
Okay. I have a couple of things. I'm sorry. I know we're at the end of our meeting here. I did just want to note, the 15th is Yom Kippur, which is the highest Jewish holiday. We don't have any BOCC meetings that day. I think if we had, I would have looked to the board maybe to cancel them just because of the displacement of that for the rest of the community. So I just wanted to bring that up here for this board for consideration. I'm happy to meet, but I do recognize this puts a burden on folks who may otherwise have participated. Since we don't get a ton of participation at APCHA meetings, I don't feel like I'm aggrieving a whole lot of people, but it is a consideration.
Does anyone have anything they'd like to weigh in on? I'm a Jewish member of the board.
Feelings about this?
Yeah, I'm a Jewish member of the board. I'm personally comfortable meeting on that day. I think people have the opportunity to comment ahead of time or after. As far as I know, there will be no second reading, so there's no last opportunities to speak. And I feel like we do have a lot on our agenda we'd like to get done. But if anyone feels otherwise, that's totally fine. Rachel.
I don't want to cut off Kelly because I have something separate. And I know
separate?
you have more than one thing.
Okay. Then
But for me, I think it'd be really important to bear this in mind for our calendars next year.
Yeah.
I know I just scheduled something for the following Wednesday week just because we didn't have anything. So I wouldn't be able to move it to then. But if the board wanted to move it, that's fine. But at the very least, we should take consideration of some of these sort of other important dates in the next year's calendar. And maybe if there's any coming up this fall that we should move before we know it, let's do it in a timely fashion.
Okay. Not hearing any protest. We can keep the meeting, but can we look at the future calendar dates to avoid other conflicts with any religious things per Rachel's request?
Sure.
Okay.
We can do that.
Okay, great. Kelly?
Okay. I also just wanted to bring back, so you remember Michael Saylor came before us?
Yes.
And so, I've been trying to sort of help him, but, to summarize again, what he wants to do is he wants to potentially replace his current 40-year-old unit in W/J and likely has additional building rights on his lot to add a second unit. And so as far as all the development stuff, I've, put him in touch with the county community development planning staff to have a pre-application conference, discuss what his right is. His, I guess, stumbling block at the start is the valuation related to the replacement of his unit and the sale of a new future unit. Now, we have a maximum sales price set in our regulations, but I think what we don't necessarily have, and staff could help me clarify this, but don't necessarily have a clear idea of how to value the unit that he would be replacing. And so what he ultimately wants to do is to have the sale of the one cover the costs for both. That's his goal. I'm not sure if I haven't personally taken any assessment if that's a fair goal or attainable goal, honestly, but that's the goal. And so I didn't think Michael's question was a one-off question because we have other units in the inventory that likely need replacement. And so I wanted to just sort of bring that back to the board. I don't think we need to have a big discussion, but we may need to have a discussion if there's a policy question or change that needs to be debated by us in relation to this individual problem that I see could be a bigger issue. And then for staff, I'd love to set up a time between us and Michael to have this conversation to figure out what's possible. And if there are policy considerations, maybe we would identify them there.
Thank you for that, Kelly.
So I'm bringing that up. Yeah, and then I'll just say, I'm going through the experience of APCHA as a seller and a buyer right now. So we won an in-complex bid in Burlingame where we were the second in the lottery and the first person turned it down. And so I just want to say it's been really interesting for me to like actually go through all the steps of this. And then we're also straddling the rule changes. So like the purchase of the home is like the pre-August 1 rules, and then the sale of our home will happen in post-August 1 rules, which aren't substantially different, but it's just sort of reaffirmed for me like how just how personal this experience is, and just also how like lucky we feel, you know, like a real I don't know, just this opportunity, and I know how enriching it is for people when they go through this, and just how monumentally life-changing like this opportunity can be. And so it's I don't know, it just continues to like fuel my interest in being on this board, and you know, trying to do what's best and what's fair. And also just the staff has been super great, you know, and I've been working with Julie and Pam throughout all this, and Cindy, and you know, so just shout outs to them too. But,
Thanks,
all right.
Kelly. Thank you. Rachel, before I go to you, Tom's got his hand up again. Sorry, I just think he may be
I
commenting.
just wanted to ask Kelly, did Michael Saylor get a green light from planning staff?
So he's a little reluctant to, I mean, he can engage in the pre-app. He's a little reluctant to engage hiring like planners and such and designers until he has sort of the valuation question figured out for what money he might need to come up with, I think. And, you know, we're having a conversation at the county about helping with fees for affordable housing. And so that was sort of one of the things that was suggested from planning staff to Michael is, hey, like you may be able to really get some waiver or forgiveness on county planning fees because it's an affordable housing
But he's got
project.
the zoning he needs to do it?
I think so. He had, it was like a lot split and then a lot, and then a joined lot. And so you know, there wasn't any like initial red flags that came up from planning staff, but they haven't done a thorough review.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Rachel?
Yeah, thank you so much. And I was just going to tell the board that I'm going to be, I talked about this last night at our special council meeting, I'm going to be zooming into the meeting from here on as the COVID Delta variant is pretty predominant in our communities, and you know, we've hit a threshold that CDC has said that you really should be masked up if you're indoors in an indoor enclosed area with people. So I really want to apologize because I feel our conversations flow much better, and perhaps I make more sense when I'm not in a room by myself. So I apologize to everyone for any lengthy divergence on the issues, but frankly, my personal safety and not spreading this further in the community is of utmost concern to me. And you know, we're asking the school kids to mask up, and Board of Health is supporting that, but the rest of our essential workforce and people in and out of buildings are kind of on their own to protect themselves. And so I've been told it's best to lead by example, and so I will be masked up and not attending meetings in person. Thank you.
Thanks, Rachel. Anybody else? Nope. I just want to put one thought in everyone's mind. I don't know if anyone feels as I do, but it is my experience that these 3-hour meetings have been very beneficial, and that we clearly need the time to work. And my brain function in the 3rd hour ain't the same as the first 2. And I don't think that's a good service to the public. So if I'm not the only one, I would ask us to just sort of individually consider, should we do 3 2-hour meetings a month instead of 2 3 hours? And I see in a meeting
we
this
don't have
problem.
time for 3 hours. No.
All right, strong no. We'll keep our brains jelly
Or
and
we do it,
engaged.
staff doesn't
I
want,
think that's a
staff
great
can't do
idea,
it.
Skippy.
What's that?
I don't know, we're
I'm
doing
joking. That's a
8-hour
great
meetings.
idea, Skippy.
Okay.
I think we do fine for 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
I think it's the last half an hour that people start to fade. Why don't we do 2.5-hour meetings? Because we didn't really accomplish that much in the last half an hour.
Yeah. Well, why don't we think about that? I'm not asking for any decisions tonight. I just want to raise it and be the first one to say, like, my brain function diminishes, and I think the public deserves at least my acuity. So, with that, I will look for a non-Rick head motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second it.
Would anybody like to second that
I
motion?
seconded it.
Oh, you did. Okay. I got a motion from Kirsten, a second from Kelly.
Okay, good.
Cindy, would you read the roll for adjournment?
David,
Yes.
Carson,
Yes.
Kelly,
Yes.
Rachel,
Yeah.
and is John still on?
Doesn't look like it.
Yeah, but I'm not a voting member tonight, am I? But yes.
Well, you can.
You are.
You're on, so
Yeah,
you still
yeah.
can. Okay, thank you.
Excellent. All right. Thank you, everybody in digital land, for joining us. You can come back and visit us again Wednesday, the 15th of September. And until then, everyone have a beautiful day, week, and month.
Goodbye. Goodbye.
Okay. Jeez.
I don't know why I took this out.